Welcome back, everyone, to Lesser Known Operators. I'm your host, Nicholas Allen, and my guest today is Patrick Michael Flood, an MBA, a Green Beret, and the CEO and founder of Owners in Honor, a Texas-based nonprofit that helps veterans get into small business through acquisition and ownership. I'll have more links to more information in the show description. Today's episode is brought to you by the Precision Wellness Group and Dr. Taylor Bosley. Precision Wellness Group can help you restore balance, unlock vitality through bioidentical hormone therapy and evidence-based telemedicine. Dr. Taylor Bosley is a board-certified physician, a U.S. Army veteran, and former Green Beret. Now, what comes along with that? Taylor knows where you've been, where you want to go, and how to get there. And on top of it, he's an actual doctor who can prescribe you actual medicine, and he will listen to you because he understands that you want to feel your best, and he can help you get there. I will have links to his website and Patrick Michael Flood's in the show description. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, comment, pass these episodes along. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Patrick Michael Flood, welcome to Lesser Known Operators, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I feel like I'm in trouble. You used my middle name.
You know, I woke up this morning and I was like, because don't you have three names? Something you sent me had three names, and I said, does he go by three names? Is he one of
Maybe
those
something I
criminals in
filled out.
history?
Yeah.
But it seems like either you're in trouble or you're a very historical murder suspect.
Yeah. Or I was in one of the John Hughes films in the 1980s.
Possibly. Anyway, no, I appreciate you reaching out and asking to come on the show, and I'm
For sure
excited to talk to you. Doing my research here, you finished up your career, 25 years, Lieutenant Colonel, Green Beret, and now, just like so many people that have come on the show, you're continuing to serve the veteran community. What's your why behind going towards that section of the population?
So I'll give you the lead up to it, I think. So I'm a third generation American, and my story, granted I'm Irish, so there's probably a certain amount of it that isn't exactly factually or historically factual, but is that, having departed from Ireland under auspicious circumstances during the Irish Civil War, my great-grandparents came over and moved to central Wisconsin, and my grandfather, first generation American, served in World War II, both grandfathers on both sides, one in the Navy, one in the Army Air Corps. And then my dad was a corpsman who then became an Army PA, ended up running a clinic for 35 years in Wisconsin. My brother went to the academy, the military academy. And then like growing up, it was just sort of part of like being a service member or being of service to the community or a public servant was just part of the family story. It's just what you did. So you either went into medicine, teaching, or maybe served in the military. And so, which is maybe pretty stereotypical for a lot of Irish immigrants. Because of that, I think there's, when I was transitioning out, I think there's a lot of reflection on who you are and kind of a reintegration even to society as to what your identity is. And I think there was a part of me that was looking at my service as a thing that I did, but it wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to be a fabric of everything that I did forever. And, talk about it all the time and tell war stories and do all that stuff. And so for 3 years, I really kind of disconnected from it when I went into finance. And so what was interesting about that time is that I started feeling a loss of a sense of purpose, where I was making good money, but I just didn't feel like I was fulfilled, that I was actually serving anyone. And for me, like I ended up, like I my Army career has been like my brother. A lot of times he went to the academy and then had a very sort of linear career. Sometimes thinks that my career isn't true because of how odd it was. But did ROTC, ended up the Army got small. I ended up in the reserves. I was an armor officer in the reserves. There wasn't any armor units in the reserves. So I ended up on IRR for like individual ready reserve for 6 months, and then moved to Los Angeles after working in politics for a couple of years in DC, and got like voluntold to find the nearest reserve unit, regardless of branch, report, or I'd have to owe back my scholarship money. Found a quartermaster unit, just showed up as a non-branch qualified armor officer. Served until the point that I was a promotable first lieutenant and couldn't get promoted to captain because you had to go to a basic course. And then my younger brother died suddenly, so he committed suicide, and he was my closest sibling. And at that point, the way I coped with it was counseling. And then I also dove into work. And at the time I was a working actor, and really worked hard for a year to make sure that, like completely head down, isolated myself from everyone and just worked and did pretty well and felt empty. And ended up getting an opportunity to come back on active duty. It was 2000 at the time. And then the Army Reserve Center in St. Louis burned down. They lost all my records. So my actual getting back onto active duty got delayed about 6 months. So I got back onto active duty as a communications officer after going to the Signal Basic Branch, as a first lieutenant in the 2nd Battalion, 3rd Special Forces Group as a signal officer. And my first day at work was January 15th, 2001, and I owed a 12-month commitment. And I should have been out of the Army in July of 2001, completely having finished my commitment. And instead, September 11th happened, obviously 9 months into it. And it changed the trajectory, I think, of my military career. The day that I could have gotten out of the Army, when my 12-month commitment was up, I was palletizing our equipment at Pope Airfield. So to go to Afghanistan. So it was interesting, just the turn of events. And I think going back to your question is to, why am I still serving, is that I've always felt that that's sort of the echo, and the community that I have, people that I've grown a profound sense of, I think, love for, are the veterans that have been in the community. And I've had the opportunity to serve in the reserves, to serve as a support person within a special operations environment, as an operator, as a Green Beret, and then in recruiting, which is sometimes both the worst and best job that you could possibly have in the Army. Best because you're changing lives. You're really engaging people and their families, and honestly, changing people's lives for the better. Engaging with the community, especially where I was in Los Angeles, that is pretty disengaged from veterans or military service, and showing value to them, and returning people back and telling stories in the Los Angeles community of people that had served well and then came back and became really engaged citizens. And then the worst, because you're always you're sort of always at the whims of whatever political movement happens to be happening at the time. So uh, you're really working really hard a lot of times in spite of the bureaucracy that is that should be, I think, in a good leadership format, supporting you to achieve success in the mission that you're doing. So that, but it was great because it got me back into remembering that. And so when I was working in finance and kind of had that sense of fulfillment that was missing, I started working a little bit more with the Honor Foundation, which is a transition organization for special operators. I helped create the Veteran Affinity Circle at Anderson, the company I was working at the time. So that was great, but it still just didn't feel meaty enough. And then when I moved to Houston, because of family stuff, I had an opportunity to leave Anderson, And they're a very generous company, and so they gave me a very generous severance package. And in that time, it gave me some actual time to take a knee and self-reflect. And I did not self-reflect when I transitioned out. I started working day one of transition leave, which is, I would say, not recommended. It was great because I had paid off student loans, which turned out that maybe if I'd had just waited long enough to get my disability rating, I wouldn't have had to pay off. But I wanted to pay them off. I wanted to, we had done my ex and I had done IVF, which costs a lot of money. And there's no insurance that covers it. So I wanted to pay all that stuff off and be debt free. So when I got out of the military, I didn't have to worry about any debt that was hanging over my head. But then in that process, I started thinking about owning something myself, like my dad did, like my grandfather did, and connecting people that I'd gone to business school at Duke and my network in finance from Anderson and other people that I'd met along the way. And I realized that I was blessed by having this great network that could definitely catapult me into business ownership myself, and had a great conversation with a mentor that I'd had who is not in the military, but has been a great supporter of military issues for a long time. And he said, you you may have you may be listed, may want to get engaged with the calling that I think is happening right now, is that it sounds to me like you're getting called to serve, and that if you do it yourself, you may still be able to do that, but it's going to take you an extra 5 years. And so for me, because of the alignment of events and the good severance package and moving to Texas versus living in Southern California, financially, I could afford to do something to figure out, a nonprofit to be able to serve others. And one of the best things that I think a veteran can connect back to community is through small business ownership, because veterans I think, are uniquely suited because they are curious, especially special operators. They're curious. They are coachable because they've been in an organization where they've had to be coached, and they are committed to community. Something that we learned during Army recruiting that we utilized in order to recruit people and create something called the Partnership for Youth Success opportunities within Los Angeles, was that it was like over 80% of people who join the military would like to return back to their home of record, and less than 30% do. And primarily it's economic. And so in recruiting, that was an obstacle that you had to overcome with parents, to say, hey, I'm not trying to recruit your kid away so he moves to Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, wherever. And I want to be able to have them come back in a selfish way. I want them to come back to Los Angeles because then I have 3,000 recruiters instead of 300. If I have kids coming back who had a great customer service experience and they had a great experience in the military, they do a hell of a lot better, pardon me, but they would do a lot better job, selling military service than I do, which from the outside perspective, I'm a white dude from the Midwest who probably has a ton of privilege. People don't know my background, but it's easy to assume that. And so, regardless of the fact that I'm fluent in Spanish and could engage parents on a one-on-one basis when I did in Los Angeles, it was always great for them to tell the story. And so now when I started getting things together and pulling it together, like the sense of fulfillment, and like any startup, the first year is pre-revenue. So you're just kind of coming out of pocket for the most part. But the sense of fulfillment, like I would say I probably help a veteran, and not because it's that I know a guy. It's that I'm now in the mix again, that I know a guy. And so people are opening up to me, just like back when I was I think a good officer, and guys would come to me with problems that had nothing to do with their service because they thought that I'd actually listen to them and try to figure out how to solve it with them. Like guys that wanted to ATS or whatever, like I never gave anybody the shame speech. They would come in and it'd be like, okay, this is what you want to do. What's your plan? How can I help you? What can I do to retain you? And help me understand why you're making the decision you're making. Sometimes it was a change of MOS. Sometimes it was a change of station. Sometimes it was a change of leadership. Sometimes it was their fault. Sometimes they were just not a great fit for the military, which is fine. Because even then, even the kids that came in and only served 2 to 3 years, they still do more than 99% of the rest of the community. So, I'm not going to take anything away from those guys, especially the ones that in such a short period of service, because I, served almost entirely during the GWAT era, is they all at least had one, rotation to Afghanistan or Iraq or whatever, which is way more than, most people do. And now in the military, when I go to group and I look in the dining facility, I'm like, holy Christmas, there's no combat patches in this dining facility. And I'm like, wow, I am now the ancient Vietnam era veteran that I used to look at.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a super long answer.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Most of what you said, I was able to figure out from your 5.5 year gap on X from posting military stuff all the time to posting military stuff again. So I figured most of what you said out by just that from interviewing people and what happens when you get out and that's kind of slump that you go into because everybody's I gotta fill what is it? I can't have any white space on my calendar. So you get out right away. You got to have something to do. I did it. I went 1 day of travel right into my next job, and thought that was going to be okay. Well, it wasn't okay. And you don't like stop and look around and be like, what do I really want to do? You kind of get into something because you think you have to be doing something when you don't. You need to be trying to get back from planet military onto planet Earth because they're not the same thing. It's basically you're on the moon for years, 25 years on this separate society. And now you have to integrate back onto Earth.
Like, it's interesting. I think, having served in combat for, and I didn't serve, it's not like there's some guys that I know that had like 20 rotations to Afghanistan, like cooks for God's sakes, because like the cooks in the GSB go every time a battalion goes, not just on the off cycle that the battalion goes. So like there's like, I didn't deploy as much as a lot of people, but I would submit that the whole time I was serving, even in recruiting, I was I remember that poster of it was like a Taliban dude with like the head wrap, and it's like, today this guy was getting better at killing you. What are you doing? And so it was like I felt that pressure for 20 years. I didn't see it as pressure at the time. But you go do a pump, go to, your AOR, and then like AOR, like all I wanted to do, like our team was great for this, probably not great stress wise because of it, but our team was great in this fact that every time that we went to South America, it was because we got better training. And so, we trained our host nation. We trained ourselves at limits that we would normally have to ask for all kinds of permission in the United States to be able to do the same stuff. And so we were trying to make it as close to combat as possible. So we really didn't get any time off the trigger, so that then when we did go back, we felt we had done everything we could to preserve human life, really, to preserve our lives. And then ideally the lives of our partners in return. And even in recruiting, like it blew my mind that the medics that we were getting assigned from detailed recruiters, or like the Cav scouts or infantry guys that were all, superstars, right? That are coming to us as E6s, getting promoted, and then going back to a unit as a platoon sergeant, don't do basic rifle marksmanship for 2 to 3 years while they're assigned as a recruiter. I was like, that's bananas. All the medics, all of their certifications expire. I was like, why aren't we doing this? Because these guys, it's not like they're going back to a garrison environment. They're going back to war. And they're not only going back to war, they're going back to war as a leader. Like, what are we doing? And I understand that recruiting is important, and going, and making appointments and talking to kids is important. But I was like, that's an output of what we need to be able to do. We need to go, not to over glorify it, but we need to go put warheads on foreheads. Like, this
Yeah.
is a dangerous business. And if we, and shooting is muscle memory, and leading people is muscle memory, and doing all that stuff. And when you're degrading it over time, especially when you're taking some of your best guys and you're degrading it over 2 to 3 years, um, because they're going to be good recruiters, you got to have a counterbalance to that. And that was something that, going back to saying it was one of the roughest experiences that I had in the military, is that at that point, I was at the pinnacle of, oh my goodness, like, 2017, 18, 19, the war was back on in Afghanistan. We were getting after it. I'd just been an AOB commander in southern Afghanistan in 15, 16. We're getting back after it, opening back up fire bases, putting guys back out in the villages. And I was like, we can't take a breath, because the enemy, the dude in the Taliban head wrap
Yeah.
is getting better at killing me. And so I'm like, I gotta figure out how to keep these guys alive. Like, it was the strangest thing. Like, in the back of my mind, I was not thinking how many. It was important how many contacts they had for, like, their interviews, for making making their numbers, based on the quota that we had to be able to commit to. But for me, it was like, I need these guys to not die when they go back to combat.
Yeah, that's like your focus, right? Coming from a unit, there's the bell curve. We're at the far
Yeah.
side of the bell curve, and then there's the vast majority that they may or may not see one rotation,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
there's somebody that'll see none. Unfortunately, I fell into the none, which is even crazier. 8 years from 11 to 18, and I fucking fell in the none category. But shit happens. I was lucky or unlucky, however you want to look at it. But I just started, okay, everything kicks off in 2001. And then who is going to be the recruiting commander for all those years? Well, for the first 10, it's going to be people that joined from 90 to 2000, and they have no experience. I'm not saying no. And if you did, come on my show. No, they probably have none. So that takes you all the way up to 2010, but they're mentoring the people that are taking over for them kind of loosely. So are, JSOC guys coming out to manage recruiting command? No. Or even, infantry command sergeant majors? Rarely. You know, and these decisions are being made by a couple people of, I don't give a fuck, we have to hit these numbers, or
Yeah.
I don't get promoted. And that's really all it comes down to, is my OER has to look a
Yeah.
certain way for me to get that star, or for the that second
There
star.
was a so here's a great here's a great example of how bizarre recruiting is. So we were the number one recruiting battalion in the United States for over a year, and we had never been higher. I think there's 42 U.S. Army recruiting battalions. We had never been, I think, higher than 30 in Los Angeles. And what it ended up happening is that almost all of the special forces officers, because we didn't used to be able to compete for those battalions, but they wanted to create more special forces O6s. And in order to do that, you had to give us more opportunities at battalions, because there's only so many battalions in special forces. So um, we compete really well against the rest of the Army for those recruiting battalions. And so it aligns really well with our skill set, I think, too, is that we're very community engaged. We're very, flexible, agile, want to solve problems, aren't afraid of talking to anybody. I mean, we've all had, key leader engagements with some governor, president, secretary of defense, whatever, of some other country. And we're all just trying to figure out how to make things work. Um, and then, uh, but for us, it was that we were kind of during the training, they kind of told us that our competitors were, and of course, I was going to Duke at the same time. So I was getting my MBA at the same time. So they were doing sort of our competitor analysis, and the competitors that they had analyzed against us were the other services. And I was like, and this is me being an SF guy, I disagree. And I think that in a community like Los Angeles, we are going to be much better off recruiting together than we are separately and attacking each other as competitors are trying to poach, candidates from each other in the process of it. So we have this, the military entrance processing center in Los Angeles has, the Navy, Army, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, and they process collectively the active duty side 11,000 candidates a year, approximately. The Army has a mission of about 3,000 in Los Angeles. And for the first time in LA MEP's history, we all hit our number. And we hit our number because we took those silly meetings that they used to do at MEPS that are normally about here's the new requirement for the duck walk. Here is why people are, need to be able to have this color underwear and like all of that stuff. And we were like, hey, why don't we turn this into an ops meeting because all of us don't see each other that much. So we do all that stuff, admin stuff, essentially for MEPS first. And then we would break into an ops meeting and then we do ops planning together. And we would do at least one, sometimes at least one a quarter, sometimes as many as, or at least one a year, sometimes one as eventually as many as one a quarter. We would do joint recruiting events together. And then it was great because the mayor of Los Angeles was Mayor Garcetti at the time, who is a Navy commander in the Navy Reserve. He was, I think, a JAG officer in the Navy Reserve. So he brought in a guy named Larry Vasquez, who is the deputy mayor for military affairs, brought in LA Fleet Week, which wasn't a thing. The Army participated in it. He wanted it to be joint. And we did a great job in Los Angeles. It was crazy how successful we were. And I got a center of mass evaluation. So and a lot of it was because I wasn't a team player, because I took conventional wisdom and I flipped it on its head and said, hey, I'm going to do my own thing. I just want to win. And that wasn't seen as, someone who would be a good candidate to be a GO or a O6, I guess, later on. So I was like, all right, I don't care. I'm not trying to do this to be an O6 or a GO. I'm trying to do this to win. And not win me, but win for my team.
Yeah, well, you gotta, you have just like all the other shit we do, right? So throw a challenge out there, go like, what is the laziest, most effective way I can win this game and have fun while I'm doing it, or destroy myself while doing it, either one of those. Um, and
That's
then
the
you
whole
just do it.
Tom Sawyer thing. I got to get someone to paint that fence. Like that's what you psych screen me for. That's the type of dude I am. You stick me around 11 other dudes that are the same way, and it was social proof. And next thing you know, I had a bias that, yep, I need to find someone else to paint this fence. And I got to sell that painting of the fence, and it's the best fence ever. Look at this whitewash. Isn't it amazing?
It's the best. It's the best. And, I mean, at the point, you guys, for officers, you go, well, all right, I'm not going to, that door's closed because I didn't, jerk off the right person. And that's fine. I don't need that on my hands anyway. But whatever. Well, how did you get to Los Angeles though? Because you're from the Midwest. Is it just, they sent you there or?
No, so kind of a combination of things. So, like I told you a little bit about the run up to how I ended up where I am now. And after college, when I ended up in the reserves, I worked at a think tank in DC my senior year of college, and then for about another 9 months. And a buddy of mine, and DC was super expensive at the time. It was very dangerous. It was still the murder capital of the world. Um, I was really disenchanted with politics, but I think mostly it was that I was pretty young and I didn't understand why I was working, 80-hour weeks and making $18,000 a year. And a buddy of mine had moved out, a close friend of mine had moved out to Los Angeles, and he was working in the entertainment industry in production. So being a production assistant, essentially like driving things to the set and picking up trash and helping catering and like all of the basic stuff. But we were making, anywhere between $125 and $200 a day. So it was like awesome. And then it was all, you were an independent contractor, so you worked when you wanted to, and you you but you typically all of us that were did it well worked all the time because it was all through referral. So you didn't want to take any white space because you're like, if I am off of someone's radar for a week or two, I may not be called in for any more jobs. And so you wanted to keep your name sort of on the top of people's lists. um, but in that, I worked in production for about a year and a half, did well, sort of through a fluke, was working as a coordinator, a production coordinator on a TV show that Steven Spielberg was doing, that wasn't meant to actually turn into a real TV show. An actor didn't show up. I fit his costume. They stuck me in his costume. I got Taft-Hartley'd, which means that I was entered into the Screen Actors Guild, and then got an audition for Young and the Restless to do like an under five, and was on Young and the Restless for like 8 months, 9 months, and then kind of blew that opportunity because I was an immature bozo, and had a tantrum with my agent because he'd made a mistake, which is not a smart thing to do when you are 24 years old and in Los Angeles, and your agent is 70, and you're upset with him because he's old. But a 70-year-old who's lived that long in the entertainment industry in Los Angeles knows everybody. And so he was very gracious to me, and he said, "Hey, I'm not going to destroy your career, but they're casting the thing that you were doing on Young and the Restless for a full-time role, and I didn't submit you. So now you're going to have to go find someone else, and hopefully you learn from this." So I did. I started taking it a lot more seriously, and then worked in Los Angeles and really had a big community of friends and stuff in LA. And when my brother uh, died or committed suicide, um, like I came back to LA, and they were great. Anytime you have a tragedy like that in your life, one of the good things that I think could come out of it is that you do a really good, um, was it sheaving of the wheat, where you really do kind of separate your real friends versus the ones that were just kind of around you for social stuff. So that was a great moment. So those friends were all still really key friends of mine. And then when I came back in, the whole cycle, and then what happened is that when I got selected for battalion, I got selected for recruiting, and then you get an OML of which recruiting battalions you want. And I was like, oh, hey, Los Angeles is on it. That's kind of interesting. This may be, I'm going to hit 20 my first year out there, 20 years active duty. So based on that, then I can retire, from there if I wanted to. I have a ton of connections there. So it makes a lot of sense for me to transition into a big city. And I'd missed surfing, quite frankly, because there's not a lot of surfing in North Carolina. And
Really?
there's not a lot of
No.
surfing in Fort Walton Beach, Florida either.
Oh no. Yeah. Um. Oh, that's bad. Won't make that joke. So, but you get done with there. What like, who comes up with the idea for Owners and Honor? Is that a homegrown idea, or is that improving on something else you'd come along?
Um, yeah. So I would say it's sort of a conglomeration of like a tic-tac-toe stuff. Um, is that it eventually became like this sort of mosaic of instances that had happened in my life that all created a picture that seemed to, this is the thing that I think I was meant to do, especially for right now. But it would, going to Duke, a lot of things that they talk about during the application process and the interview is, what do you want to do with your degree? And what positive social impact would you like to have through economics? And so for me, what I saw is that a lot of veteran nonprofits have a real difficult time raising funds in a time during peace. Um, One second, sorry. And so, uh, using the fact that any company that has a single revenue stream is vulnerable, to any influx in that revenue stream is that is it theoretically possible to be able to create a nonprofit that has multiple revenue streams that could be self-sustaining? Initially, that started out with the concept was refugee resettlement, especially for displaced people, because like initially when people get displaced, a lot of the people that are displaced are people that are professionals, and they're the ones that get stuck in sort of the resettlement programs at the UN, and then their all of their certificates, all of their doctors, lawyers, like everyone just gets rolled up in this, and then suddenly their incredible human talent is just kind of diminished, and then they get put somewhere, and then the community that absorbs them sees them as a parasite instead of seeing someone as a value add. And that was kind of that one of the thoughts, and this goes back to sort of the being a Green Beret and understanding that, insurgencies happen at multiple levels, and there's a great way to reduce the number of accidental guerrillas by providing people a graceful path, and then, to use a term that sometimes is a little bit inflammatory, indoctrinate them to the U.S. and being U.S. citizens. And I think that someone who had a great pathway to the United States would not just like the United States, but I think a lot of them would love the United States if it was better for them to integrate and fully integrate and really become a contributing member of society and not end up in some sort of ethnic ghetto of people that have been resettled. So that was initially where it started, and then I was like, that's a little lofty. I'm not trying to solve the world's problems today. And then eventually things things broke down into the fact that that same model makes a lot of sense in the veteran world. And what is a way that, the Wounded Warrior Project, all the other organizations that raise a ton of money because people are getting hurt because of combat, those guys are all going to be in trouble when we're not in combat. And the goal is for us to eventually end wars. And so how do they sustain themselves other than creating an endowment and making investments? And so from that was kind of in the back of my mind. Then I work at Anderson, and in Anderson, we had acquired the valuation services in Southern California of Deloitte's valuation and mergers and acquisitions services. And so part of my job as essentially a chief of staff for the office was to try to understand what they were doing as their vertical and make sure that they could get work. In order to do that, you have to break down exactly what it is that their value is and who their customers are. How do you do that, et cetera, et cetera. So in that process, I started seeing a window into the mergers and acquisitions realm and connecting it to my dad being an entrepreneur, my grandfather being an entrepreneur. And because before it was like disparate things, like they weren't connected. Those things weren't the same thing. and then I was sitting on a panel at the Honor Foundation in San Diego, and one of the things that they'd presented was entrepreneurship was on the panel. But I'd been on like the commercial pathway to W-2 job panel as part of Anderson. And so one of the people in the crowd stood up, and he was a special boat team guy, like an E8. I consider him sort of the avatar for doing a lot of this. And he was like, I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't have, a high wealth friend who's willing to be an angel. I don't have another Black Rifle Coffee idea or grunt style idea. So how do I do it? There's got to be a way to do it. And he kind of turned to the folks from the Honor Foundation. He was like, you guys said that you could help me in this, so how the fuck are you going to help me? And literally he said that. And I was like, holy shit. So instead of getting hyper focused on the inflammatory way that he said it, I was like, I got to see, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to connect them to someone who's buying businesses, doing something, right? So I started connecting aggressively to the entire nonprofit because it was like I felt like this is a calling to be able to help this guy. So, and I was shocked that the best case scenario that I could get was really a 3-week boot camp about how to buy a business. And I was like, so no one's doing any advisory for this. No one's consulting people through this. No one's risk mitigating. No one's helping them understand the pathway. And so because of that, I ended up saying, that's interesting, but that sounds like a lot of work to be able to create that from scratch. I've never made a nonprofit. I have really not the time to be able to do that. So I'm going to go do my own thing. And then a year later, when I was transitioning to Houston, it was self-reflection that I said, well, I think I am well suited to that. Like maybe I'm going to go do that. And it makes a lot of sense because it connected a lot of dots. And then through that, back to, one of your original questions is that's where the impetus to serve others became. And I was like, no, I think this is actually, I've been given the grace, by God to be able to take time, self-reflect, and then provide value to other people. And if I can get 100 veterans to buy 100 businesses in the next 5 years, it would be, I think, a much more satisfying impact and create the network around it, just like, Robin Sage and the auxiliary, than me doing it myself and enriching myself. Like I think I can do that later. And while I'm not happy that I have a disability rating, and I'm not because of some of the things that go along with it, um, but having a disability rating, living in Texas, having a pension has afforded me the ability to focus on this right now. And a lot of the, having been a decent person, I think in other odd disconnected places in my life, like I have a good network of people that all have very similar values. And so being able to get a lot out of people for nothing right now with the promise of things that are going to be better in the future has been incredible. And that's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah. Well, it feels like that all sounds very complicated, first off. But it's simple the way you said it because um, sometimes I'll look at the nonprofits go like, I don't even like, I'm an ambassador for Green Beret Foundation, but I don't even know what we do because there's so much shit that they're doing so much shit all the time to help
Yeah.
people. And
Yeah.
I'm like a talker. I
Yeah.
give me a little project or I'll let me create my own stuff. I can talk to people. I can just walk up to people and start telling them about the foundation, get money out of their pockets into that's my thing. Um, but you're right. You're like, to what end are some of these projects effective for getting people? Because there's all right, we're going fishing, right? And getting all the boys together and getting some healing in there. That's kind of the one thing we do. And then, okay, you need care for this thing the VA is not helping you with. Okay, we can help you with that. But like teach a man to fish, give a man a fish sort of thing project. What are we
Yeah.
doing for that? Is
Yeah.
and that kind of sounds like what you're on there, right? I can give
Yeah.
somebody something in the interim to hold them over, but what if I teach them how to give themselves that
Yeah.
tool to get them down
And
the
so
road?
I really am taking the Green Beret approach to this. And I had the opportunity to serve at a TSOC for a little while, which I think most of the people in our community would say that's terrible. Why would you want to do that? Wouldn't you want to be on a team? And
Although it's my listeners well know that I would stab 3 people right now just to go sit on a C team or
yeah,
or in the basement at group just to put
yeah.
my uniform back on. So I'll do whatever the fuck that I would. It's not going to happen, but I would do anything to put my uniform back on. So
But it was so I was a special operations liaison officer in Peru for a couple of years and worked essentially directly for Admiral McCraven, who was the SOCOM commander. And um, one of the things that we did with Peruvians, because initially they didn't let us in to really engage them in any meaningful way, was to explain to them that we didn't want to be there forever. I was like, look, bottom line is that we're in the middle of fighting a war. We can't afford to send 50 Green Berets here every year. Like we have to figure out a way that you guys can support yourselves, train yourselves. And then in a perfect world, we want to be able to have you export security just like Colombia is to Central America, where now we only have to send 2 Green Berets with 30 Colombian special operators who are then engaging, the El Salvadorans, the Hondurans, whatever. That's our goal for you. And they were like, oh, so that's okay. So then they opened up the window a little bit more and allowed us to see what was going on. And then it was just a matter of building trust. And trust through transparency. Like we were completely transparent about, I would say 90% of what we were doing. And they were like, "Oh, that's the first time anyone's explained this to us." And I was like, "Yeah, we're hiding in plain sight. This isn't exactly something that we're like sneaking around in the middle of the night in black Velcro. This is like, hey, we're trying to help you reduce the coca population or coca growing fields so that narco traffickers don't suddenly have a gigantic influx into Peru. And then you have a government that's going upside down. And then we have to fight a war here with you."
Yeah, just a small interjection before we go too much on it. It's for everybody listening home. So on one of the Facebook pages, right, the emergency and the earthquake in Thailand, right? Um, there was a news clip of tabbed Green Berets going and helping people get out of helping people out in Bangkok and shit, right? And one of the guys got on the Facebook page, Vietnam era guy. He goes, "Why the fuck are Green Berets in the rescue effort in Bangkok?" And the next guy jumped in and goes, "Where the fuck have you been? We're everywhere. Like we're fucking everywhere for the like, dude, it's not Vietnam anymore.
Yeah.
We are literally doing shit in every major city in the fucking world. What the fuck is wrong with you?"
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I thought was, as a US citizen, like we had a couple of US citizens that died in a whitewater accident in Peru while I was down there and I was solo. And to see the extent that the US government made efforts to recover them, who we knew were probably dead, was something that I think every American needs to see. Because there's no other country that I think would have done anything even kind of like we did. We took every special operations unit that was down there that was training our partners, completely disengaged. We did intel analysis, grid square analysis. Like we were actively searching for people, and it's like real world. You're down there, teaching notional stuff about a potential war that may or may not ever occur there, and it like on a dime you have to switch, and like now we have to recover a separated US citizen. And so it's like that's the sort of stuff that I think, between that and every American needing to travel more. I think it was talking about Tom Sawyer again. Was it Samuel Clemens or who said that travel is I can't remember. He said travel is the great remedy for racism, or
Samuel Clemens? You mean Mark
something
Twain?
like that. Yeah. He said something about the fact that like basically Americans need to travel more,
Yeah,
and
they
then they're
do.
not going to be so insular. But yeah, it's the same. Like seeing how awful a lot of the places are in the United States. Like I am so grateful to live in the country that I live in. That it's hard to express because I've seen the difference, and I've seen places that are doing it well, and it's like like the difference is stark, and the freedoms are different. Like everything is different, and so um, yeah, I think stuff like that. I can't remember what we were even talking about at this point, but the the fact that that's just we're sometimes, as Green Berets or special operators in general, we're the most capable people in a country. Period. Like that's it. Like and it's bananas because I'm sitting in a ambush line in phase 2 in frozen rain, frozen to the ground, thinking that at some point I am going to be one of maybe 3 people in a country that can actually save somebody. And it's you're just like, what? Like how do I get from there to here? Is and it's I would love to have like every kid who's going to selection like understand like no, this is the amount of responsibility you're going to get at some point, and you're not going to get a whole lot of cred for it. You're not going to get patted on the back. No one's
Yeah.
going to give you an award. This is just what you're expected to be able to do.
Yeah, you don't know what situation you're gonna find yourself in. I had somebody on the show that was, he was the commander he was the highest ranking US soldier in the country as a captain. And then like when they did split team ops, the master sergeant was on their island. He was like the commander for that. And he's like,
Yeah.
that's all we got. And then,
Yeah.
SOCPAC was like, what the fuck is going on down here and shit like that. But I was in Korea as a staff sergeant. I had 4 soldiers as staff sergeant, and the commander goes, all right, you're in charge. And he fucking left the country. And I'm like, so do I have signature authority? He's like, I think so. Here's the memo. I'm leaving. I was like, oh, cool, man. And I look at my soldiers. I guess I'm in charge. All right, let's not get arrested here, and then everything will be just fine. So
Yeah.
you don't know what the situation you're going to find yourself in wherever you go.
Yeah.
And SF's like, you could just be the only guy out there having to make decisions to figure shit out, which is fucking cool. I think it
Yeah.
was a cool
Yeah.
experience. But I mean, that's getting towards you got to get a lot of experience into that point. How do you go from? You said you're originally from Door County,
Yeah.
rural Wisconsin. What drags you into the recruiter's office, or is it still that
So for me,
the
it was just,
initial?
yeah, it's the initial, like, I would say probably forever growing up, I just assumed that I would serve in the military or public office. Just, it's just what you did. And so, um, when my brother applied to West Point, he denies this, but I know that's fact, is that he applied based on my application. So I'm 3 years younger than him, but I was the one who was sitting in the guidance counselor's office as a freshman, or as I guess maybe probably eighth grade, because our middle school and our high school is in the same building. Is that probably eighth grade? Maybe my brother was a junior, and I was bringing home all the academy stuff because I was like, great, my parents can't afford to send me to school. I got to figure out a way to pay for it. I'm a pretty good athlete. Like, I was all state in track and field, but it's probably not going to give me a paid, like, track is not exactly a high scholarship, item unless I'm like world class Olympian. And so I was like, so that's probably not going to pay for school. So I got to figure out a way to pay for school. I didn't want to go to school in Wisconsin, mainly because I'd read a ton of books and I just felt like I wanted to experience something different to see if I could. And I always knew that Wisconsin would always be there, and I knew that I was always safe coming back home, and that I'd always be welcomed. And so for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to take my rural Wisconsin butt and go to a place that I don't know anybody. And so I went to college in DC where I didn't know a single person, and got a ROTC scholarship. Thankfully, got a presidential leadership scholarship as well. Ended up being able to pay for college that way.
What happened
And
to West
then,
Point? That just didn't work out.
so that's a long story. So the West Point, so I applied to West Point, and I also applied to the Naval Academy. The Naval Academy, I ended up getting rolled because we were playing like regional basketball. So I got poked in the eye, and I ended up not being able to pass the vision test for the Naval Academy. So the Naval Academy wanted to enroll me into the prep school. Military Academy, which is where it was actually my second choice because my brother had gone there, and I was like, I can't do everything my brother did. I want to go to the Naval Academy. My one grandfather had served in the Navy. Oh, there's a lot of illogical conversations that happen when you're a younger brother.
Especially now when you're looking back, you go,
It's
idiot.
asinine. Like, I have no idea why. Like, he was an infantry officer. I didn't choose infantry. Had I chosen infantry, I'd have been an active duty. And instead I chose armor, which had took the biggest hit during the Clinton downsizing because all the heavy divisions got destroyed or got given away basically to the Germans. And so it was like all of our tanks were sold to Saudi Arabia. Like, it was just like, all right, I guess we're not doing this anymore. Had I been an infantry officer instead, I would have gone right away to IOBC. But it is what it is. I'm really happy because I can relate to almost anybody in the military now. The only thing I haven't been is enlisted. So, but my
Well,
dad was enlisted. He was a Mustang.
you didn't miss anything.
but it's nice because, like, when I was the headquarters company commander and then the camp commandant at downrange, like, I got logistics dudes under me, right? And they're all like, oh, this Green Beret is going to look down his nose at us and whatever. And I was like, bro, I was a general support platoon leader at the National Training Center supporting the 4th Infantry Division in 1997 and 1998. I was treated like garbage, hot garbage for 2 rotations. I was wearing armor branch. I hadn't been promoted. I was serving in a quartermaster capacity as the acting company commander because it was just a complete ash and trash of everything that ended up in the reserves at that point. So I was like, bro, like there is nothing that you could tell to me that I'm going to talk down to you because I've seen people like in the reserve unit, like I think I showed up, we had 37% participation rate. Like people wouldn't show up to drill and then you couldn't go get their equipment. And so I was like, because it was in the 90s. And I was like, oh my God. We had 0 lensatic compasses in the entire company that worked. And we had over 300 people in the company. They hadn't done any annual training requirements except for their PT test in years, in probably a decade. And I was just like, oh my goodness. In the meantime, my brother's in like a airborne unit, and he's the first of 509th jumping on airplanes, being like up for in in Louisiana. And he was like, "There's no way this is real." I was like, "No, this is real. Like this is life in the rest of the army."
I bet
So
there's somebody somewhere right now that's doing that is going, why do we have no compasses? Where the fuck
yeah,
are all the compasses? So
yeah,
I totally, all that shit's real. Yeah, I spent time in the fucking regular army where I'm like, how is this a real place? Like, how is this
yeah. I
this
was
isn't,
like,
this
what
isn't
is
what I
happening
thought it
right
was
now?
going to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah,
I know
like
what you mean.
literally having to secure all of your antennas off your vehicles at NTC because everyone just stole. Like you would have 10 antennas stolen all in one night. And you'd be like, oh my God, like how are we going to replace that? We have no money. And so you're like posting guards at your vehicles because you want to have because you have to go and launch people. And so you're just like, oh my God. Um, yeah, it was interesting. I have other stories about serving as basically a volunteer for the National Guard for 9 months as well, while I was trying to get back. While I was trying to transfer my commission to the National Guard because all the armor units had gone to the National Guard. So I was just trying because I was still trying to be an armor officer. So I tried to transfer my commission from the reserves to the National Guard, and they wouldn't allow me to do it because the reserves was short officers.
And
So I trained.
you're in the years
Yeah,
when there's nothing going on, right?
it
Because,
was post Gulf War,
yeah.
and we were having the peace dividend, and we went through 2 massive downsizings during President Clinton's second administration.
Yeah.
And it's also the same time the intelligence community took a huge hit, and when all of our human kind of got rolled, got just told to go away, and we were going to use electronic means to gather all of our intelligence from now on, which is also why we had such a gigantic blind spot, I think, in 9/11 and some other stuff. But peace is a weird thing. So it's expensive to keep all those dudes ready all the time. And so you want to have a peace dividend. But America's had a pretty good history of trying to, getting punched in the face typically, whether it's World War I, World War II, Korea, you name it, and then getting our act together and saying, okay, this is serious. Now we're apparently in a fight. We got to stop getting punched in the face and figure out a better way to do this.
Yeah. Well, we like to react to things a lot better
Yeah.
than we like to be ready for them.
I mean, it's
And
it's a good thing maybe that we have a short memory. Like we're also like I'm Irish, right? The reason I'm in the United States is because of getting thrown out by the British by the Crown, and the very first casualty that I had as a member who's an LNO on our team is a guy named Sean, who was serving with us as an LNO from the British Army, and um, I would have never, as a child, with all the resentment that I thought I had toward the British, ever envisioned myself on July 4th of 2007 standing on an airfield in Bastion, basically a British airfield at Bastion, at Fob Bastion or yeah, Fob Bastion, I guess, in Afghanistan, handing our U.S. flag that had been in our firebase to the commander of British forces and then the helmand to give to eventually give to the spouse of the deceased LNO who had died with us, who was an Irish guy who was living in Great Britain who was serving in the British Army. Like in no chapter of my childhood would I have envisioned that would come full circle and have these people that in my mind were always the enemy, um, being absolutely not the enemy, in combat, and definitely, our allies. And so it was, um, and I like the fact that we live in a country where I can not have to harbor that resentment my entire life,
Yeah, it's
like generational resentment. Like,
we get
unfortunately,
mad
shit
for
happened,
other
but
stuff. Yeah.
they were trying to figure things out. So let's not just live our life angry and bitter about why we're here, and try to make the most of being here, and be grateful to the fact that we live in a country that gives us an opportunity to do that. Because there's a lot of places that you wouldn't really have a chance.
No. Um, it's it is a great place. There's no place like the United States of America and how things it is. But you are right. People do need to leave the United States once in a while to gain a deeper respect for how things are here, and maybe it's not so bad. Um, but I, yeah, but I would go live other places, like drop of a hat. I'd be like, yeah, I'd go back to Korea, or I'd go back to I'd go to live in Thailand like tomorrow.
Yeah,
But
but I think it's similar. It's similar, I think, to me, to saying I'm going to go to Washington D.C. for college. Is that I always knew that I could come back to Wisconsin.
yeah,
And the the interesting thing about, like, because I agree with you, I'd love to live in Italy, like, Europe or Asia. I've never really been to Asia, like, other than the part that's sandy and people want to kill me. And so the um like going to, like, living in South America for longer, like actually making it home. But we always have that safety valve of saying, hey, I still got this blue passport.
yeah,
And when this country goes into the toilet, because almost all of them do every 6 years, you're like, okay, I can go back home where, yeah, I gotta deal with people being bitter on either sides of the political spectrum, but no one's trying to, you know, lynch me in wherever I grew up. Like, quite frankly, no one really cares, and they want to do commercial fishing. They want to build boats. They want to, have their kids go to school and generally live in peace. And so it's like,
that is true. As nice as South Korea was, there was a crazy guy just on the north side of the border
yeah,
threatening to nuke us every day that we were there.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Um, he's threatening to nuke us here in the United States also all the time, but I'm like, it's a big country. The odds he hits me are pretty low here
yeah.
in South
Living in
Korea.
Southeast Wisconsin, less. Maybe Chicago, you're possible, but living in Houston, I'm on top of the list. Like, they're gonna, like, we're pretty high on the list, and so it's like, oh well, there's, like, you just
We'll be
control what you
fine.
can,
Yeah, we'll be fine.
just be a stoic about it. Yeah,
That's my wife asked me. She's like, "Well, what if we're watching, what is it, like Last of Us or something with zombies or something?" She's like, "What if this happens?" I was like, "We're all gonna fucking die. Like, even I know what I'm doing in the wood and I can survive, and we're all gonna fucking die. Like, there's no like these things are unrealistic. You know,
what'll happen?
people are
I'll
gonna
die later.
yeah, we're
Like,
just gonna die later. There's no,
yeah,
you know what's gonna happen? People are gonna turn. Like the people that are crazy, that are kept in check by all these laws. When those laws go away, they're gonna fucking take over and start killing everybody.
yeah.
So yeah, like we're all gonna
I've
fucking die.
unfortunately seen sometimes the far spectrum of unchecked human behavior, and it's been like the first rotation that we had in Afghanistan in 2002, like the green on green violence. So between different factions of warlords that were happening in Afghanistan that we couldn't intervene in, um, was just like, I don't think anyone's ever captured it. I don't think anyone's put it in a book. I don't. It was shocking what human beings were doing to each other, and especially as that being sort of my first experience in combat. Granted, I was a signal officer living mostly in Atak, but that was when, Predator Feed was new. So we were watching it like combat TV because we had no real TV. So like doing anything like that was sort of amazing. And we were very engaged in everything that was going on anywhere in the country. And so, it's just been, it was really, I don't know. It was, like when it really highlights the naivety of some people, I think. And there is an arrogance sometimes of naivety, but the other part of it is like, I'm glad that your average person doesn't have to know stuff like that occurs and occurs on a regular basis and in ways that we can't intervene. Like it doesn't make any sense for us to intervene.
Yeah, because once you know something, then you can't unknow it, right? And there are, and I'm not saying I'm a fucking know-it-all or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying right now. I know some stuff and I've seen some stuff and heard and whatever the fuck and everything, right? To where I don't feel things the same way that I used to because I know of some things that do happen out there. And I just can't, like, I don't have that capacity for caring as like
Yeah,
other
to your
people do
point, like you're
because,
watching
yeah,
television, right? And so
yeah,
when I came back so I got married like maybe a year, and I hate saying this, but my first wife. So when I got married, the first time, it was like right after the Q course, and then boom, deployed right away. Um, everything that you hear that older mentors say, don't get married as soon as or while you're in the Q course or right afterwards. It's the busiest time of your career, unless she could be completely independent and you've known her for forever. And so no fault of hers because it just was what it was. But with the combat, got injured a couple times in Afghanistan, came back, was really focused on rehab for me because I had TBI and was redeployed because I had TBI. And so, wanted to get better, wanted to get back to deployed, wanted like focused on that all the time. And it was also, I think, at the same time, if I'm not mistaken, that the Kardashian stuff was kicking off. And so, like, to a regular human being who's back in the United States, it's like the biggest thing that everyone's talking about. It would make me so angry to talk about the Kardashians, like angry because of all the stuff that I'd just seen in Afghanistan like we had in our deployment, I think we had over, it was like a 8-month deployment. We had over 100 and almost 130, 150 days of ticks so that we were actually in engagement. And so of the time we were there, almost every other day we were in a firefight. And
what year is this? 7?
2007, yeah. And it was, we did split team ops. We were working with MARSOC. Um, we split our team into 3 teams. So we had 4-man teams that would go out with a MARSOC element with our partner nation. And then we would have one element training dudes in the back, another element prepping to go. And then we would rotate all 3 of us. So I'd be out sometimes just really with one truck. And that was all the SF guys was in one truck. And and as the team leader, I was out almost on every mission because with the exception of the MARSOC commander, I didn't need to typically be the one calling in all the fires. And so I was out all the time. And I came back, I got blown up twice. I got bit by a cobra during a firefight, long story. And, and then came back because my left eye stopped working because the second time I got blown up and was like having memory, like showing up at the Harris Teeter parking lot, not remembering why I was there. Like,
Yeah, I've
but
been there.
I thought that was going to be forever because I knew a
I call
couple
it
guys
skipping.
that had been busted up pretty bad in a rotations before, and they were still like that, like tremors, looked like early onset Parkinson's or MS, and I was like, oh my god, this is my whole life from now on now. And I was like, great guns, 7 days a week, trying to get better, and got better, got cleared, boom, went right back to Afghanistan for what was supposed to be 8 months, turned into 11. because they were trying to offset our rotations so that we wouldn't take, so the guys after us wouldn't take both Christmas and Thanksgiving. So they were trying to offset it. So we had to take both of them, so to try to offset it from that point on, which was fine. I mean, I was an HHC commander at Cape Commandant, but it's the 11 months away from someone after you'd gone through all that stuff that was not awesome for our relationship. But what was your question again?
You went off on the TV thing.
Oh, yeah. And then coming back and like we had nothing to relate to. Like her life was related, like most pop culture in the United States, about like the Kardashians. And I was like, I can't have these conversations. I would just get so, and to your point, like watching The Last of Us, I think all that stuff is entertaining now. But I'm like, it's not the same anymore. Like now, if I see, what is it, Warfare or whatever, that movie that just came out, that's the stuff that now it's about the Navy SEALs, I think, in Iraq, but where it's like, no joke. Like like that made me feel like I was like things were happening again. And where it reminded me of that year in 2007, we were in so many firefights because we had a lot of days that were that bad. And it was just, we just didn't lose a lot of people.
Do you know Chris Schott?
I do not. I don't think so.
Roman Roselle? No, okay. They were there with you at that time.
Were they
I was there on the
Marsoc dudes or?
No, they're. I mean, Chris was definitely was because I think he was there in 7 with you.
Well, so here's the thing. So we were at Firebase Price in Greshk, Afghanistan, and we at the time were the only team that was SF team that was in the Helmand, and it was British battle space. The whole Helmand was British battle space. A couple months into it, the first of the 508th, 82nd Airborne Division cleared the Sangin, and so we deployed forward in AOB, but it was not my company; it was a different company. So, second battalion was in the eastern part of Afghanistan, and like my buddy who was the team leader. I think they had a couple of like HVT target stuff, like level 1 con ops or whatever, and or level 3. I can't remember which is more intense, but like, and they were always like taking helicopters places, and I was like, one, there's no helicopters here, so we're driving everywhere. Secondly, and just hoping that we don't get blown to smithereens. And then secondly, is that all we have is up armored Humvees, and when we were calling in fires, it was on wideband, so the whole theater would hear us. And he was like, "Man, how many times have you guys been in a tick? Like I feel like I'm like listening to like a constant stream of you calling in like troops in contact." And I was like, "Yeah." Like the whole theater knew it. Scorpion 36 was in contact like the whole time. Like we would stack aircraft above us because our job was to disrupt the Taliban C2 node in the Helmand province. So we were just making life miserable for them. But we were super active because of it though. But it was great. I mean, we did everything that great and awful all at once because it's the worst things you could possibly see, as a human being. But at the same time, everything that we were trained in the Q course, we did. We did aerial night drops with under nods. We did caches. We did long range reconnaissance patrols over 3 weeks in the desert, where we would sleep in the desert and attack at night. We would get intel dumps. We were living out of our trucks. Like it was like fantastic. We would engage our local nationals to go buy food off the economy. They would bring in fresh food because otherwise we weren't eating fresh food for sometimes longer than a month. Having everything from water to fuel to ammo dropped to us, in the middle of the night. Like it was everything that you trained for, everything. And then for the first month, I didn't have a JTAC. So I was also doing all the control. So it was froggy. It was spunky time. But it was great. our team had a human network as well. So, because that's one of our specialties as a team. And so that was super interesting too, because we had to re-engage sort of that network. We were working with, adjacent organizations in the US government. That was great. That we got our hands slapped at one point because we were working too closely with them. But at the same time, it was like all of this stuff was everything that you had ever heard about in the Q course that
Yeah.
you're like, no way is that ever going to happen. Yeah, it happened. And then to come back and hear about the Kardashians, it was a lot. I was like, I can't remember why I'm at the Harris Theater. Two, I come back home and I'm listening about the Kardashians. Like, this is like, I can't do this. Like, I got to go find peace.
Yeah, every once in a while, something about it, not all the time. Something will come on sports where the person says something, and I go, I don't want to fucking watch this. Like, shut the fuck up. Is there anything else on? But then what'll get me is like Charles Barkley will say something. He goes, "We ain't fucking working." You know who's working? Teachers and people in the military like people that are actually working. This isn't work. Shut the fuck up. You're not. This
Yeah.
isn't hard. We're playing a fucking game. I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, but then I think like perspective, right? The worst thing to ever happen to you is the worst thing to ever happen to you. And you've seen
Yeah.
way worse things than I have. And there's people, I've seen way worse things than other people have that have never left rural Wisconsin, right? So you have to,
Yeah. And
but that,
it's all relative. And so
yeah,
the thing that I think, like, I've always been a somewhat religious person. I'm Catholic. And I would submit that after getting divorced the first time, is that I really did kind of, between both my brother committing suicide, which is there's a lot of misunderstood information if you're a Catholic person about people that commit suicide. And so diving back into the catechism, as we call it, which are sort of the rules, and then also really kind of digging into stoicism a little bit, and quite frankly, having the wisdom to provide people grace, is that that's not always, like, I definitely there's a little angry monkey inside of me at times that definitely wants to come out and shake people. But at the same time, I would say that the trunk monkey is generally repressed, or suppressed, I guess. And that instead it's like, I just gotta, it's given me, I think living in such intense times now, at times for me, gives me, it's like it slows down conflict now. Like the other day, someone, like this guy on a motorcycle, like, was flipping out because I'd slowed down for someone to cross a crosswalk, and he was like he pulled me over and was yelling at me, and I was like, in the middle of it, I just had this point of reflection where I was like, "You're scared." I was like, "You're scared, and that's why you're yelling at me." And me pointing out that you're scared isn't going to help anything. And I just need to be a bigger person and just be like, hey, my fault. I understand that you're upset, and I don't think that anything else needs to happen at this point. Um, Proving to him that I could hurt him isn't going to help anything. Um, Pointing out the fact that he was afraid isn't going to help anything. Um, Teaching him about the rules of the road as a motorcyclist who's, I've ridden for 20 years, like, isn't going to help anything. So I was like, hey, yeah, I get it. Like, you're pretty pissed off, and I'm sorry. And like, having the grace to be able to do that in the moment, that has definitely been earned wisdom
yeah,
over time, because
takes a long
like,
time to get there.
as a young lieutenant, it was like there was no filter. Well, two reasons. One, I didn't think I was staying in the Army all that long. I thought I was like, hey, I'm here for 12 months and then I'm out. And so you ask me a question, I'm going to tell you my opinion, which is good and bad. I think a lot of people trusted me because I would just tell stuff. But I realized that as people started listening to me more, I need to be real accurate about what I said, and not make it hyperbole or inflate things or exaggerate, because people took me literally at my word. And I was like, okay, like, I got to take that 10% Irishness down and just try to talk about brass tacks. or tell someone, hey, I'm just venting, and then say all the crazy stuff you want. But give them, again, give them the grace to understand where you're coming from so
Yeah.
that they don't take you literally and then do something that was not meant to be literal.
How did that work out for you in the Q course?
So in the Q course, I was, so as a lieutenant, reserves, even first year serving as a support dude in an SF unit, I was able to sort of act that way. Then when I went to the Q course, what was interesting is that the guys that I looked up to in my battalion, some of them were instructors. And so I knew suddenly I felt the same onus of not embarrassing my family that I had growing up. That I was like, the reason that I act well or in public or do anything, period, is to not embarrass my family, not to bring shame upon my family. And so it was the same thing because I was like, these guys are going to connect me back to third group, back to my battalion, and then they're going to blame them for allowing me to do this. And so, like, I just need to keep my mouth shut. And it was, to be honest with you, it was great because I sprained my knee during phase two. I think during phase two, yeah, during phase two, and normally I would have been like medically bounced and rolled to a different class, but they allowed me to go to the med shed and ice my knee, and so which is great. Normal, or maybe it was selection. It might have been selection. It was one of the two that you're not supposed to be able to take Motrin. Might have been selection. Um,
Selection, you did. I remember you couldn't have anything.
yeah, so it must have been selection.
Moleskin was all we could get. You could get
So
moleskin
they'd
and
give me
like,
an ice cup every night because my knee was inflamed and it was swollen and sprained, and they gave me an ice cup every night. I had to do it extra. I had to go over there, but it was because they knew who I was from having deployed twice to combat with these dudes. And so, like, for me, I was like, okay, these guys are now like, I'm kind of part of the in crowd. I just need to not fuck this up. So because if I fuck it up, I'm not just fucking it up for me. I'm fucking it up for them letting me even do this. And then supporting that, hey, this one signal officer, which almost none of us make it through the Q course, is going to go to the Q course and then make it through and then be a Green Beret. So I was like, I can't bring shame upon third group. I can't bring shame upon my battalion. Can't bring shame upon my leadership. Can't bring shame upon the 112th, which 112th Signal Battalion. My battalion commander was awesome. Encouraged me to go to the Q course. Um, and it was really like, I got to not fuck this up because people put their own reputation on the line for me. And so that's how it worked out, I think. Then there's still that part of me that's like wants to poke people in the chest and tell them to shut the fuck up and fight. But there's, but that's just,
well, you don't, because that's called being an adult.
yeah,
And that's
yeah.
growing up. But so you were encouraged to go, but why did you make the decision to put your packet in?
So I think it was two reasons. One, I'd actually put my packet in earlier when I was in the reserves. So, and this is a whole story. So when I put it into the reserves, I still wasn't branch qualified, but I was miserable doing what I was doing in the reserves. And I saw the 19th group guys who were down at Los Alamitos, the company they had there. It was like Charlie Company, maybe 3rd Battalion of 19th Group. They were doing interesting stuff. They were jumping out of airplanes. They were going to Latin America, I think, or Asia at the time. And I was like, oh, this is relevant. It's the middle of the 90s. I was like, maybe I'll put in an SF packet, see if I could go there. It got denied because I hadn't been to the basic course. So I was like, shoot. And then later on, didn't think I was really going to go. Got assigned to an SF unit because I was like, maybe this is as close as I'm ever going to get. And then, went to combat with them once, got assigned to the 112 Signal Battalion, Special Operations Signal Battalion, deployed again with them to OIF1. And then when I was there, I was given a tremendous amount of responsibility. I had a boss that believed in, to the letter, the book Message to Garcia, which is essentially, I want to give you my intent and then good luck. And so it's like, all right, look, they'll figure this out. And he had been the signal squadron commander, like super good human being, still really a person that I looked up to quite a bit. And he was like, hey, there's this other dude who's comes from the unit. He's an SF guy. I think that you are better suited to do that than be a signal officer for the rest of your life. You're a very good signal officer, but you're a signal officer in spite of the fact that you don't like communications. So this isn't like the thing that you love. You're doing it because you know it's your job and you need to do it well. And so instead, I think that this other thing would be really well suited to you. Why don't you start training while you're here? Because I was doing like night shift. So I was doing 12 hours at night. And then during the day, I would get, 8 hours of sleep and then train for 4 hours a day. And so, or whatever, 2 hours a day and then eat. But so I came back from Afghanistan, like ready to go. Or sorry, Iraq, I guess, or Qatar, ready to go. And I was like, someone else, like I wanted to do it, I think, but I was afraid to say it. And because I'd said it too much at that point and it wasn't happening. And then someone else brought it up who I admired and like opened up the gateway for me to really kind of believe that I could do it again. And then try. And then it was the matter of now I need to not embarrass him and I need to not embarrass, my former battalion commander in third group and everyone else that I really admire, still admire. And yeah.
So you had a pretty good idea of what an SF guy was then. I mean, because a lot of people
Yeah,
come on here, especially on the enlisted side, that they're like, did you know what you're getting yourself into? Fuck no, I didn't know it. But you're coming from third group, so you knew the
yeah.
gig,
So
right?
I did. So the earlier time that I submitted a packet, I had no idea. It just seemed like what they were doing was way more interesting than what I was doing, and I'd watched the movie The Green Berets, and so I was like, oh, this
Oh,
is
okay.
great. And this is better than what I'm doing. Um, and then later on when I went to first we were planning on going to Operation Focus Relief in Nigeria, and then we were planning on going to Kenya for OEF1, like our battalion was, and then we got pivoted to Afghanistan, and then the other signal officer who was supposed to be the SIGO left Afghanistan, so I ended up being in charge of the SIGDET, or the whole SIGSEN, and so it was like I really got to see both the good and bad of what a bunch of SF dudes are like the very first time anybody goes to combat, which is really interesting. And then also what a non-combat period would look like going to, a JSET sort of operation in Operation Focus Relief in Nigeria. And so I was like, either one of these is interesting. And if I could stay in this realm as a soft guy, I just in general liked the soft community better than I had. And to be honest with you, I'd never been in the conventional community. So closest I got is in the reserves. And is that the it was the impetus of everyone was just so different than what I'd experienced up to that point.
So let's see. What I pieced together is you probably graduated the course around 2005 or six,
Yeah,
and then
2005.
you took a team in 2006, 2007.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
did we did a JSET, and then I did a compartmentalized mission in South America,
Okay.
and then came back from it, and then did pre-mission training and went to Afghanistan.
So what was the Q course like for you? Because for those years, for some reason, the majority of the guests on my show were X-rays in 2004, 5,
Okay.
6, and
Yeah.
7. So you were there with those guys. Completely different experience that you're going to have from them. They just got brutalized going through. What was it like going through the course for you during those years? Because now they're really starting to make changes because it's looking like the war's going to keep going.
Yeah, I don't know. Like the thing that surprised me most about the Q course is like when or not the Q course, but like selection was when I was at selection and I was roster number 109. And I remember because it's PT 109 is like President Kennedy's boat. So it's easy to remember. But I was roster number 109. There were, I think at that point, there were maybe 4 signal officers in selection. In my selection class, there were Marines, sailors. There was a Coast Guard dude. Um, there was like, and then the some of the guys I met were like later on, I guess in phase two, there were like everything from I'm a small vehicle mechanic to I am a uh, psychologist assistant to I am like people that I was like, what? And that made me not feel so bad having not
Yeah.
come from a combat MOS. Um, I was, I think, the only signal officer that made it all the way through the course in my years to be able to then get a Green Beret. We were typically not treated super well, the combat support dudes, because we all have to go to the infantry captain's career course, and those dudes do not like teaching a signal officer basic infantry stuff. Um, my instructor there literally said, I am not going to teach you anything that I think you should know at this point if you're an infantry officer. If you want to learn it, you need to talk to the other students. And so I ended up making really good friends with a guy I had gone to the selection with. And he was basically my tutor to do some of the basic stuff, which is funny because both my instructor and the guy who was tutoring me, neither of them had been to combat. I've been twice. But it was like, but I hadn't been in a ground role. So I knew theoretically, I knew exactly how everything worked, like op orders, like how the annexes worked, why we did it, did planning for events like big combat operations in Afghanistan. And, but I didn't know how to set up a firebase. And
But you
so
didn't
I
know
was like,
battle drill 1 alpha, or
yeah, I
so
was
you were a
like,
shitbag.
like I
Yeah.
got to do headspace and timing on a 50 cal. Okay. Like that's not exactly in the, in the resume of a typical signal officer. So like if I'm doing that, then there's a, like they say, what is it? Because we used to only get issued pistols. Is that if it comes to the point that I need to grab a rifle, there's gonna be a lot of them laying around.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I can't speak to it, but I just know you're who cares? Really,
Yeah,
just
the
teach me
thing
the
that I thought
shit that
was
I need to know.
interesting. That's the first time I met X-rays though, and the
Yeah.
X-rays at that point were like it was nuts. Like I'm a Wall Street trader.
Yeah.
You're like, what? And this guy's a lawyer. And like people that are roughly about my age, but like advanced degrees. And like, I honest to God, like I wanted to see them succeed because I was like, this is America. This is Tom Hanks in Saving Private Ryan. He's a school teacher. And now now he's, in charge of a ranger element rescuing people. And I know it's fictionalized story, but based on a real person. And so it's like, that's what it is. Like the people that answered the call after World War II were not a bunch of dudes that thought that the military was going to be their whole career. They were teachers and, like Colonel Chamberlain, like from the Civil War. Like they're like
Well,
he's a
Grant
professor.
was a patent clerk from Galena, Illinois. So,
Yeah. And so it's like all of that stuff. I'm like, this is us. This is the United States. Let's figure this out.
yeah.
I didn't meet until Robin Sage and Robbie Miller, who ended up getting the Medal of Honor. He's the first guy that I met that's like a straight off the street X-ray. So he had only had, I think, 2 years of college. He was, I can't, maybe he was 21. I don't even know if he was old enough to drink, quite frankly, because at the end of the Robin Sage, you get White Lightning, like Carolina White Lightning. And I can't remember if he could drink it because I don't think he was old enough. And so it was like I think he was like 21. And that was that to me, that was super weird. Like the x-rays that were coming that were like, 26 and they had, the advanced degrees or whatever. Like that to me made a lot of sense. Um, the guys that were like 19, 20 years old that were coming in, that made less sense to me because like I remember like sitting down and teaching him because at that point I'd been in the army to include 9 years. So I'd been almost 10 years in the reserves and everything else. And so it was like I was teaching him really basic stuff that like anybody in the army should know. And if he didn't get it in like the prep course or if he didn't get it in the Q course, he just didn't know it. Had no idea how to run a range, had no idea how to do like a whole bunch of stuff. So I was sit down and like teach him. And the he was like great kid, but initially like the amount of arrogance that he had from having, being selected to be a Green Beret who's like 20 years old. I was like, man, more often than not, it's the dudes like up until that point, you're 25, 26, you've been in the Army 6 years, you're annoyed as hell at whatever you were doing. You know that if you go to selection and you come back, it's probably not going to, I'm sure you weren't welcome back with flowers and a cornucopia of fruit when you came back to your unit. It was probably a lot of,
I was, but
you
I
were?
was not on out the door. It wasn't. It was like, why are you going back to selection? I was like, oh, I hurt myself, so I'm going to go back and pass. And they're like, well, if you don't make it this time, that's enough of this fooling around. I was like, fuck
Yeah,
you.
I saw dudes that were like, didn't make it, came back and were just shamed out of the Army.
Well, that's
And
Ranger Battalion. If you leave Ranger Battalion and go to selection, you're going to second ID, or you're going to wherever you're at. If you're at Lewis, you're going to
you're going to
second
Fort
ID. If
Riley.
Yeah,
You're,
if you're at Stewart, you're going to fucking third ID, and if you're at Benning, I don't know who's at Benning, but you're out. You're out. That's it.
yeah, yeah.
But
So, like, that was interesting. Like, what was on the line, I think, for a lot of the folks that had come from other units, it was interesting. Like, you were like the officers, categorically, all the officers who came from conventional units were afraid of not making it, and because we get one shot because of the timing, and so it was like, if you don't make it and you go back to your unit, that may be the rest of your career. That's maybe it. Because you're going to eat an OER typically because of it. And then after that, do you get another good job? Do you stay? Do you get any good PCS? Probably not. So it was like taking that walk was, you didn't know, you were kind of choosing not to be in the Army almost, and saying, hey, I know that I could be treated like, I could be treated really badly if this doesn't work out.
yeah, that's one of those sacrifices, right? You got to make the
Yeah.
decision. Do I really want to do this? But you only have a little. Now there's a little window of time that you get as a second or the first lieutenant, and you got to put your packet in. But every unit's different, and everybody's story's different. Like a lot of people come on here and it's like, I had a strange path. I was like, man, you have no fucking idea. There's people that have told me the strange path. One dude took leave in the Air Force to go to selection while on leave in the Air Force. And then when he gets back from leave, he goes to his commander and goes, hey,
I'm in the Army
yeah,
now.
I didn't go see my family. I need you to release me. It's like, what are you talking about? Yeah, from the Air Force. Get the fuck out of here. So yeah, everybody's got it straight, and but it's just like it's a sacrifice that you're gonna make, and it's a really rewarding career, but you might not figure out the payment for it until later when you go to do something, or you've sacrificed something later in life for this thing you want to do now.
Yeah, I think it really is. I think it really is a calling. Like, you have to hear a calling, whether or not you're a person who believes in God or Christ or whatever. But it's like, I was like, it's either this or, and like in the star course during selection, like I had been given awful points. I'd had to cross the Uwari River like 3 times, like back and forth. So all my stuff was soaking wet. It had rained for 2 days. Which is like, I was just finding people on like, as we were doing land navigation, just in their fart sack, like on the trail, just completely quit by themselves in the middle of the woods and just waiting for the bell. And I was like, oh my God. And the last point was in a draw and I couldn't find it. And I was like, I had like 2 minutes, not even kidding. And I was just like, it was like I got super calm and I was like, hey, this might not happen. And this is the chance that I had. So I could be upset and anxious and run around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to see if I could find this point, or I just want to be able to take the tools that I have, all the training that I've been given up to this point, trust it, and then, start doing quadratic search of the grid square and just be super methodical. And so that's what I did. I was like, here's the sectioning, here's the grid square. I know the points in here. I'm going to go find it. And
Yeah.
literally, this is like almost like a movie. Like literally found the point. It had been pouring rain. Found the point. It was on like the tent was on the downside of the draw. Like definitely it was definitely a star course killer for probably most of the people that had that point in selection as their last point. And like I found him, and then like he's like, give me your sheet, signs off on the sheet, and then like I hear the bell, and then the rain stops, and the sun comes out. Like no shit, like it's like real. And I was like, I was in shock. Like I went to the vehicle, got my rucksack, set it on the vehicle, and just sat on the tailgate of the vehicle, and was like, holy shit, like I made it through selection. Like I was like, I was 20 seconds away from not making it.
Really? I mean, did they give you a standard for points?
Yeah,
Or
because the time ends up the time, right? At the end of it. And the time was running out. And so it was like the final bell. You have so many points to see within a certain amount of time. And like
I'll see.
it was all over but the crying. And I
They
was
didn't
like,
tell
I'm just
us.
not gonna
They
get my
didn't
last
tell us
point.
what you had to get. So yeah, we went out 2 nights. This was 2012. You went 2 nights, and if you got 4, you got to rest until the cadre picked you up. So I go out the first night, I get 4, and the second night I was kind of bummed out because I got 4 like 20 minutes before the time was up. So I only got to rest for 20 minutes. I was like, oh fuck, I'm gonna get to take a nap. And I couldn't find the point. So I know it's here. So I just started walking, and I'm just burning extra calories until I found it. And I was like, fuck, I just wasted all that time. I could have been sleeping right now but they didn't tell you. And like dudes got selected that got 2 and 3 or 2 and 4 or 3 and 4 and stuff
But
like
yeah, we
that.
had to get, at least from my perspective, we had to get all of them. There was hey, at this point, like it'll be indexed. You're going to hear a horn or whatever. And if you don't get all your points at that point, you're out. Like no one that I recall, and I I don't think my memory's foggy about this, but is that no one that I recall could get like 3 points or 2 points or whatever. You had to get them all. And so like without me getting that last one, I would have been done. Like I think we had to get 8 points in 2 days or whatever, and like it was the second day when you start doing land nav in the dark, and it didn't change because it was pouring rain, so it was just dark the whole time, and like I went through the river like 3 times or twice, and was just like soaked, like full blown like whatever it is, like the water moccasin, like in the river. I was just like, fuck it. This is like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die in the Orari River, and it's done.
Yeah, there's a point you go, just if it bites me, it bite. Like I don't give a fuck at
Yeah.
all. Like
I didn't stop to pee. At that point, I was soaking wet. So I just peed myself, just kept walking because I wanted to save time. I was like, who fucking
dedication.
cares?
It's
I was like,
dedication
nothing
right
cares
there.
at this point. Nothing
Yeah.
matters. Like all
Yeah.
my shit's wet. Like I'm like my rucksack must have weighed 80 pounds because of all my wet clothes that were in it, my wet boots, like everything was soaking wet. I was just like, ugh. Between that experience of like misery and then the experience I remember in phase 2 when we were laying in the ambush line and it was freezing rain and I was the 240 gunner and I froze to the ground. So when they went up for the assault and I went to pick up the weapon, I was like, and had to pull myself off the ground. And I was like, what am I doing right now? Like, this is the dumbest. But it was like funny. It wasn't like I was so angry or scared or questioning myself. I was just like, this is nuts. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah, there was points like that in Sear when we were doing some stupid fucking some stupid shit. And I just looked at the one guy and I started laughing. I was like, I don't think it can get any worse than this. And
Yeah, I
everybody
mean,
just started laughing. And then the cadre are trying to make us stop laughing, but everybody's dying laughing. And I was like, oh, no, it can't get any worse than this because everybody's laughing. So it must
like
be as bad
I
as it.
know we can't really
Yeah.
talk about SEAL school, but like there's the one part of it that all of us are together, and there's exposure, and
Yeah. It's that
that
part I
was
was
like
talking about. That's
I
what I was
was
talking
like,
about. Roll left and roll
and
right.
yeah, and all of us are like they're saying mean things to people, and you're just like I was fucking dying. Like I think all of us, like there were guys that were, oh man, they were gone. Like they had bought into at that point they were in low spots and they were getting teased, and I was like, oh man, this is hysterical. Like okay, talk
Yeah,
about my
no,
man
and we're
area.
we're getting sprayed with the hose and everybody's laughing and I was like, it can't get any worse than this. It's November, like it's
Yeah,
Thanksgiving in 2 days. Like how can this get any worse? And it's 2 in the morning. Like we it's just so
and you haven't slept in like 2 days. Yeah,
oh, yeah. So, but yeah, at that point you go, because when you get to that point, you're like, yeah, I don't. There's nothing's gonna shake me from this. We're just okay, just whatever.
like I just need
No,
to hang on. This is the last
yeah.
thing I'm doing. I just need to hang on.
But that's the whole course, right? They're just getting ready for the next time that shitty scenario comes up. You're like, I can handle this. You know, I can go do that. I can stay up for 4 days and get the shit done. And you know, probably take years off my life, but I'll get the mission done and I'll get it done. Sir, whatever you need, I can get that shit for you.
And also, there were guys that in Sear didn't step up, and especially the officers that you're all supposed to all the officers are supposed to take a leadership role, and there were guys that did not. And after that, I was like, "You are trash," because all of us took a beating for somebody else, and they were the guys that were avoiding it the whole time. And I'm like, "How can I trust you? Like, you're gonna let the dude next to you get the shit beat out of him because you're not like you can't even play the game. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing, man? Like, you think you're so pretty you can't get slapped by Captain Chaos? I don't know if he was still
Allegedly,
around.
allegedly,
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 allegedly.
allegedly, allegedly. No, no, I had Naked and Afraid. That's who I had. If you want to figure out who that is, you got to do some research. But yeah,
Yeah,
that
we
was
had Captain Chaos.
no, no. I had Naked and Afraid. That motherfucker gave me a concussion. I'm hoping he comes on my show so I can fucking be like, you motherfucker. Um, working on it. I'm working on. I'm
One of my
in contact with him.
one of my Bravos was an instructor at the Q course. I wonder if it was uh, for or not at the Q course, but at SEER school for a while, for like 2-3 years.
It's a good gig. I applied. I didn't get a response back, but no, man. We the course was fun, But so how's it from? What are they telling you guys? Because all the enlisted guys, the majority of the people are enlisted, right? And then you guys, what are you guys being told that we're not? Because you guys are off doing really until I started doing these interviews and stuff. I didn't really know like what you guys did in your portion of the course because all the enlisted guys were all fun and hanging out and partying on the weekends, but you guys are off like I don't know what the fuck you guys are doing for your thing. So
Yeah, I mean,
what are you guys being told throughout the course?
uh, a lot of it is we're getting, we get a fair amount of like we are kind of sequestered from all the enlisted guys, and we're not really being told about the enlisted guys other than the fact that they're going through their own MOS phase and stuff like that. They're all different. And then usually as the officer, you go to portions of each of the MOS phases. Like, I don't know if, what was your MOS?
Charlie.
Yeah. So like as a Charlie, did you go to the Delta course or the Echo course or the Bravo course? Yeah. So we did.
No.
So we would go to each of them to see what the training was like. And then when we'd participate usually in like a couple day event or a day event at least at each of the different training things. because we had to understand what everyone's job was. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that we do, I think, as officers that has to do with like critical decision making and ethics that they know. To your point or our point earlier, is that sometimes you're the senior dude in the country, and so if you're the senior dude in the country, then it could be that all of the ethical decision making for the United States is on your shoulders. So, like helping you understand that the implications of making thoughtful decisions, I think, is a big part of what we're doing. Um, and then we're getting a ton of stuff. Like during the course, we were getting a ton of stuff about the active of like intel that was going on currently in theater. So we would get a warm start when we started planning to go to take our teams whatever to theater. Um, that was, I think, the main stuff. Really, is that I don't know what it would be like to go through the Q course when you're not in combat, when we're not a army at war. But for us, it was like, we'd have guys that just came back from a rotation, give us debriefs and like constantly. So we had a constant stream of what was going on with fifth group and 10th group and seventh group and third group and first group. And it kept us like sharp, I think, the whole time. But we also, anytime that you have a bunch of officers around each other, you all sort of degrade to E4s. And we all, went to Raleigh for the weekend or the beach for the weekend or, a bunch of other stuff.
Interesting.
Whoa,
Yeah.
aggressive.
Um, the I don't. Yeah, I did not have that experience. That was we would just show up to a particular section of training, complete training, and then act like we weren't in the military anymore. Like just go blow up, party, get hammered, blow off steam, and go out. And it seems like you guys were, you guys are getting ready to have the weight of the world on your shoulders. The officers were definitely a lot more serious, and we were, at least I think, we were not.
Yeah, I would say that like it was very clearly communicated to us that if something goes wrong, it's our fault. Um, and so, uh, and then you'd have, it's not like officers were the only ones doing debriefings. You'd have team sergeants come back, sergeant majors, and they'd be like, I hate all officers. I hate you already. I don't even know you. Um, you're going to get your guys killed, like all of this stuff. And you just be like, oh, sweet Jesus. Like, I don't know if you remember during the Q course, there was the gentleman who was one of the senior SEER instructors. I can't remember his name now, but he's famous. And he'd been like left by his team leader in Afghanistan at one point, and he hated officers with a passion. And like when we went in as officers and had our like special debrief during SEER school, getting ready to get everything done, he like laid into us for a half hour about how we're not worth two shits and that he doesn't trust any of us and we're all just a bunch of bozos trying to be generals and that guys like us left them on the ground and left people to die in Vietnam. And I was like, oh my God, this guy hates us. I can't remember his name. He was famous.
That sounds, I
Hated
mean,
us.
that sounds bad. Like being left behind by your
Yeah,
team leader
hated
sounds
us.
bad.
Yeah.
I told you about my team sergeant. Fuck that guy. But my team leader was brand new when he got to the team. I think we got there at the same time, possibly. And yeah, the rumor is, and I'm trying to confirm this. So if you want to come on my show, you can come on if you knew at the time. But he got rated supposedly so poorly once the major found out from me what actually happened on that training event. He rated him so far down in the fucking doldrums of hell that he had to resign his commission. He was done. He was out. Like,
Jeez.
yeah. So I hope that's true because, uh, I like the story a lot better than, just got out because, but whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's the
I
thing.
think,
I can see where enlisted guys get that opinion is like, if you, if you got a bad team leader or a bad officer and get fucked by them, then you're going to apply that to everybody, just like that we all do that.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, like when we were talking about earlier, as a matter of perspective, is that, and giving people sort of grace to their own experience, is that officers have very fixed wickets that they have to make in order to be able to be promoted. And so,
Ooh, I like the reference to fucking cricket. There we go. I love
to,
it.
and so so like we really have to hit the time exactly. And great example. So I get injured. It's not really discovered until 2009 when I'm at Naval Postgraduate School that I have a broken neck. And so I couldn't go back to a line unit right away, even though I was pretty high in the OML coming out of group. And so I got assigned to a TSOC first instead of going back to group, which is not favorable because what ends up happening is that the alignment to like sort of your stratification of officers that you grew up with shifts, and suddenly I'm off cycle. And so all the guys that I went to combat with, all the guys that like who are senior to me are different dudes because those guys are, in the course or they're in the majors course or they're going to be lieutenant colonels now or whatever. And so when it happens for us and we're off sequence suddenly, like we're kind of thrown on the heap of, hey, there's a bunch of SF officer jobs that need to be filled in the Army. You got to go do the weird thing now.
Mm-hmm.
For me, like it ended up working out pretty well for me, but I could not have planned it this way. Where I went to the TSOC, ended up getting better or rehabbed enough that I could jump out of airplanes again, and then went back and took a line company, and then took them to combat. But I took them to combat as like a very senior major. I was almost a lieutenant colonel, and most majors are brand new majors who just went through, sort of the course that you become a major in, and so that was interesting. So the guy who is like my battalion 3 was junior to me. The group 3 was junior to me. I had more combat experience than all of the other like majors in the unit, and that was interesting. So that was weird. I was way more cynical than they were because of everything that had happened, and so um, I wanted to go do our job, not get too caught up in the politics, and do things right, knowing that hey, this is probably my last shot. Um, and we did, I think, really well in combat. It was weird getting to know my unit 3 weeks before deployment because I had been assigned to a different company, and then a company commander was traded out with me just before deployment, and so I went to a different battalion, different company, and deployed with them. But it was a rocky road, I think, at first because no one knew me. Plus, I came from a different battalion, and some of the guys when I was working for SOCOM remembered me from some of their time in Peru that they had come down, and I was a stickler for not having guys go to jail, and so I had a couple of guys go home at one point, and instead of staying in Peru and getting in trouble, and like the certain elements of the organization didn't understand the perspective that I had of doing so. And they thought that I was disloyal, that I was, this REMF that I'd gone to the TSOC and had lost my loyalty to group and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, man, if you guys screw this up, we have 9 soft elements in Peru. You're screwing it up for everybody. So you guys just need to go home. Everyone's going to forget that you did anything here. And then you haven't really done anything that's too egregious that like even it wouldn't harm your Army career. You just can't be here anymore. And so it was what it was. But, you're making, I think, a lot of the right choices along the way because you're not being political. But going back to what the reason I was even talking about this is that there's a really narrow window that you have to meet all of the timelines, and therefore you don't want to fall out of disfavor with somebody as an officer a lot of times because you do want to be able to command a battalion. You do want to be able to have an opportunity to command a group. And so what ends up happening is that you could be in the chow hall and tell somebody to take their hands out of their pockets. And next thing you know, you're on the next thing, smoking to SOC core. And you're like, what the fuck just happened? And, it's because they are not part of your regime, and everything that you built as a reputation outside of their regime doesn't matter. And they're just going to throw you on the heap. So because of that, officers, I think, always have this like pressure of performing and doing a little bit of performative leadership. I think sometimes where you see like, it's almost like when you see, the veteran Shark Tank or whatever, Shark Tanks in general, where you like the officers come up and they pitch their con op, and I'm just like, what sort of dance is this? This is such, and like fancy PowerPoint graphics. I was like, this does not matter. Like you're performing for some other higher ranking officer. The guys don't care about this. No one can actually do the things that you're saying you're going to be doing because all you're doing is making a performance. So, like for me, it was always much more like, look, we're not going to be able to send graphics over radios. We have to train like we fight. So let's do really simple con ops that people can understand. Let's make sure that we can put it in a written format because there's no pictures, because pictures don't work. Back in Afghanistan in 2002, we had DAMA. I don't even know if you know what that is. So it's that
No, I don't.
demand access. What is it? Multi demand access, multi something, but ultimately it breaks down like voice communications into little tiny segment packets so you could send information over stuff. Like we had two wideband channels, I think, in all of Afghanistan. One was the CSAR network, the other one was like a TIC network in 2002. So like that's the reality I grew up in. And then you go through these other folks that had only been in like the garrison army, and they've gone to like performative operations in NTC or whatever, and you're like, you're standing up doing this pitch, like, but the battalion commanders a lot of times were impressed by that. And I was like, but it's not realistic. And this goes back to you saying the guys who were in charge of recruiting back in the 90s hadn't gone to combat, probably, hadn't, had this experience. And so everything they're teaching is theory. And so for me, I was like, that's not real. This is what really happens. This is what the con ops really look like. This is how we really get missions approved.
Yeah.
And
The
then,
one thing also, like, even if they had, you're coming from fresh experience, fresh in your mind. Like it's all that lessons are there. Like, I mean, I know stuff that I learned when I was a kid, but I'm like, ah, man, can I still do some of that stuff? You know? So if you're not refreshing some of those skills and like being able to, you could have that experience and then not be able to put it in because you didn't keep up with it, and that's
yeah.
not necessarily your fault, but it's
And
just
so
it's
there's,
not fresh in your mind.
there's that aspect, right? The performative sort of leadership aspect of it. And then the other part is that you're only on the team for, I think the qualifying time to be on a team is 22 months. And so like you got to make an impression in 22 months, and there's no soldiering your way out of anything. So if you screw something up, that's potentially your entire team leader time, which in a place that says there is no such thing as a zero defect army, that is as close to zero defect as you can get. And so it is like if you screw something up, and combat is just a comedy of errors. And so it's like the number of times that probably me and guys on my team should all be dead is like I couldn't count on both my fingers and toes. But it's had one of those things gone sideways, that's it. That's not it for my career for sure, but probably for my team sergeant, probably for my Fox, like the next guy up. If I had a warrant, he'd be gone.
Yeah.
But the enlisted dudes, for the most part, they could soldier their way out of it. Like two of the guys on my team were guys that had come to me from other battalions where things had happened. Like they didn't have a great experience on their first team or whatever. And as enlisted guys, you got kind of that opportunity to go get a fresh start. For an officer, if you saw an officer bounce to a different team or a different battalion, like nobody, like the fact that, I mean, his rucksack and duffel bag was on a short list of things being put in the hallway real fast. And
Mhm.
so it was like, like you were already like, great. Now we're getting this cast off from the other battalion, the other company, the other whatever. And then the community is so small. They all knew what would have occurred. And oh, they got in a fist fight downrange with their team sergeant, or they spent op fund money that they shouldn't have. or they did a paper whipped inventory and turned out they didn't have stuff, or they overbriefed a con op and didn't actually execute it. I mean, all of it. And so
Yeah.
I could see that there's like I appreciate the friction. Like it makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot expected of you. So, going back a couple things, I do appreciate for those listening at home, they didn't catch that, but I love that a seventh group guy took the opportunity to insult a first group guy, and nobody caught it except for me, because you tell somebody to get their hands out of your pockets, and then you're on the first thing smoking to sock core. So appreciate the dig. I caught it.
So,
I don't know if anybody
so
else did.
not a dig, but as a seventh group guy, that's like sending us to Timbuktu.
No,
So it's
I
like
understand what you're
I
trying to do. I
speak,
understand what you're trying to
but if
do.
you're a first group guy, I'd be like sending you. I don't know where would be a good one. All the rest of them are
Bangladesh.
pretty good.
It's Bangladesh. That is the worst.
All the other socks are pretty good though, because you got Sock which is in Stuttgart. That's pretty nice. Like I wouldn't mind that backwater. Sock Sock South, which is in freaking Miami. Like that doesn't
My,
suck.
my buddy's the Sock South Sergeant Major right now, and he seems to like it a lot.
Sock Pack in Hawaii. That's awesome. The only
Yeah.
sock that's like kind of on the lower end of the echelon that I can think of is Sock Core. Because even like the sock that's like sock NATO or NATO, whatever it is, the NATO sock detachment is in freaking Brussels. So it's like they're all in super nice places. Korea, from my understanding, I've never been to Korea, is great. I think the mission's actually interesting because you're actually almost on a wartime footing all the time.
I see that because I've been to Sock Corps, and it did move. It did suck. Yes, where they were at, their facility, but it's
That was
moved. It's
not
a lot nicer now.
there was an unintentional dig at first group. It was
No, I
not an
like it. I
intentional
mean,
dig at first group.
I got it. I understand. I get where you're coming from, sir. But no, the other thing I want to say is like you, like from all the way in your timeline, right? It seems like um, give yourself a task or get given a task, and you'd want to get it done regardless of really what the people in charge of you think about it. You're just going to do it to the best of your ability, no matter what. And where did you see guys that? Okay, how easy was it for guys to say, "Well, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability," but also what the person rating me thinks about it, so that I'm putting their.
There's a friend of mine who led by chaos, and he's like I love him. I would never want to work with him. He knows who he is, and like he would intentionally like I'd drink a beer with him every day of the week, but like I do not want to work with him because of his leadership style. And so he would like kind of not do much and then wait for a crisis and then solve the crisis. And like for me, the amount of anxiety that it would give me watching him work, even though like his area of what he was doing was different than mine, it didn't really affect me. It was like tremendous. I'd be like, you'd know, like you can see 2 steps ahead. You know what's going to happen. And he's like, yeah, but if I do it now, like I'm going to probably run into friction with the people that are doing it the way that they're doing it because they still feel like they own it and they don't want to listen to me. They don't want to get my help. And so instead of allowing that to happen, I'm going to let them fall on their face. And then when they come and it's an emergency and now their boss comes to me to solve it, then I'm going to solve it because I already know what the solution is. And I was like, I don't know how you can operate that way. That would give me such a massive amount of stress. But that's, it is what it is. There's also there are guys like it's probably, I wouldn't do it differently because I'm very, I can look myself in the mirror and say that I was doing what was right, and take that to the grave. And but there are times where I was given the answers to the test of like so-and-so really likes this, if you come here and here's this special chair, here's the drink he likes, or here's the cigarettes he likes, or here's whatever, or he really likes to do this and he likes to do whatever. And if he likes to golf, and I'm willing to bet if you ask him to golf, it's going to change your career. Like all that stuff, I never did it.
Yeah.
And I I don't know if it was pride that maybe not do it. But I was given the answers to the test a couple times, and I was like, not doing it. Like, not doing it. Like, it's just not my thing. Like, I don't want to be a poser. Like, do I like golf? Sure. Does my group commander love golf and therefore his whole life is about golf? And do I think I'm going to get the cool jobs because I'm going to get extra time to hang out with them by playing golf with them? Yeah. Do I want to spend 6 hours of my day doing that? No. Do I think that I can be a good human being, do what's right, and have, quite frankly, my non-commissioned officers and peers respect me? Yeah. Do I think that that's more important? Absolutely. Do I know that when the chips are down, that they know I got their back? Yeah. Like, and not got their back because I'm just, hey, everyone on my team is perfect, but got their back in the sense of, hey, I know they screwed up. This is how I'm punishing them. Like, leave me to it. Not like just letting someone get crushed by the system, just stepping out of the way and as a offensive lineman and just letting someone plow into the quarterback, because it's gonna potentially leave some stink on you if you stand up for them, and simultaneously not just dying on my sword for everybody on my team who does something that's potentially unethical. So it's like we talked about it quite frankly, and I was really blessed to have the team that I did. But like, hey man, we're going down range, things happen, people are married, there are things in other teams that occur. And I am telling you this, don't ever put me in a position where I have to lie to your wife. And they were like, okay. And everyone felt the same way. The whole team felt the same way. And so it was like, okay, like, and because of that, I think we chose just not to do it.
Hmm.
But it was like, don't put me in a position where I have to lie. And like, if that person in this world can't trust you, then why in God's green earth should I? And so it's,
Good policy.
it was different because then we also had half the team was single dudes. So they were out living the life. And it was, and as the officer, I didn't want to be a statistic. So I did not live the life, even though I was single for a lot of it. And it was just like, hey man, like the last thing I need is to be the person who marries the girl during JSET. Cause like, that is the like stereotypical junior officer move. Like, go overseas, turn into, everyone feels like you're a warlord, and you read your own press, your own clippings, and you're like, maybe I am this cool. Maybe I am Captain America. I should marry this person. Yeah. I did
No,
not want to be that statistic.
the Morgan Freeman voice in the background. He should not marry this person.
He should not marry
Definitely
this
should not.
person. Yeah.
So, how long were you team leader for?
I guess for 2 years. I probably could have been on the team a little bit longer, but I got injured. So when I got injured, I got taken off the team a little bit earlier than what I could. But I think I was on like 24 or maybe 26 months.
Pretty good though.
Yeah, it was well at the time. We were building out those 4th battalions, and so 7th group was the last group to get the 4th battalion. And so what ended up happening because of that is that all of the officers were being pushed to those groups that were growing those 4th battalions, because it was a line battalion initially. So they were pushing all the officers to those groups, and then therefore their time is on the team for sometimes 18 months, maximum 20 months, 22 months, like the bare minimum. 7th group didn't have enough team leaders because all of them were being pushed to those other groups. So when I graduated the Q course, I was actually supposed to go to 3rd group. And then my former battalion commander became the group commander of 7th group. And he said, hey, if you come, like, long story, it was actually Bobby Cinco, super good dude, who's hysterical, just a character. I don't know if you know who he is, but he was the first sergeant during selection during the Q course out at Bacall. and he was a 7th group guy, and he saw me signing into 2nd Battalion 3rd Group and off a leave. And he was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "I'm signing in. I'm coming off a leave and I'm going to go get my team." And he was like, "Don't do that. Go see the boss." He was referring to General Reeder, who was the 7th Group commander, who had been my battalion commander in 3rd Group. And I was like, what am I going to go talk to the 7th Group commander for? And by the way, if you live in 3rd Group, you may or may not know this. You hate everything about 7th Group. Like, I grew up hating 7th Group. And so everything that they did sucked. It was like they were unprofessional, like categorically, like just ridiculous. Every stereotype you could think of. And we were the combat group, and we were doing things, and we were hard as nails, bunch of country boys, et cetera, et cetera. And then, so I was like, I'm going back to the battalion that I went to combat with. And he's like, "Go see General Reeder." So I went and saw, at the time, Colonel Reeder. And he brought me in, and I was like, "Hey, sir, I was the honor graduate of like the language course. I'm a French speaker. And I don't speak Spanish." And he goes, "Well, here's the thing, Pat. Afghans don't either." And I was like, "All right, I guess I'm going to Afghanistan." Fast forward about 6 weeks, I'm in Espinal, Colombia, having to teach an op order class off of cue cards because I was like literally memorizing because thankfully I could speak French fluently. I was memorizing all the other Latin language and then just spewing it out with a good Spanish accent. And like people would ask questions, and I'd have my at the time, I guess he's the junior Delta at the time, translate for me. and then thankfully I went to a different mission in South America that I did not need to speak Spanish. And then went to Afghanistan. And then when I was at Naval Postgraduate School, um, Admiral Olson, who was the SOCOM commander at the time, we pitched to him, some of the students did, that the guys that were at Naval Postgraduate School, because you come back to the unit off cycle, is that you would stay there for another 6 months and refresh your language. And so because I hadn't taken Spanish, instead of refreshing it, I went straight into the Spanish language course at DLI and ended up being like I'm a 3+4 now in Spanish. So, and then, went straight to SOC South, was there for 45 days, and then got sent down to Peru for over 2 years. So had to write in Spanish, read in Spanish, speak in Spanish, listen every day for almost 2 years. So it was great, but yeah, odd how I ended up in 7th Group. Odd how, but because of that, going back to the time, I was supposed to have been able to potentially be on a team for up to, I think, 30 months. And had I not been injured, and then had to go back to Afghanistan early. And so they took a guy who had just graduated the Q course and put him in my team in Afghanistan because they were there for another like 45 days because they couldn't have the team without a team leader during that time. And I came back and they didn't know what my status was. There wasn't the Wounded Warrior Battalion or any of that stuff that exists now. So I just came back on a reefer to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, met my wife, and was like, "How do I get treatment?" I didn't get medevac right, a whole bunch of stuff from the system. So I had to go back to Wisconsin. My dad's friends with like the Packers doctors. The Packer doctors ended up giving me an MRI. The MRI then got sent to Fort Bragg so I could get into the TBI clinic. And like I was getting back to Afghanistan come hook or crook. Like it was happening.
Was that the right decision for you physically, mentally, looking back?
My soul says yes. I think it was what I was supposed to do. I think I did exactly what I was supposed to do. Would I have stayed married had I not done that? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't really have any regrets so much as I know that being in the position I was in a couple different times, that God granted me the grace to, I think, save lives and also engage the enemy in a way that I think some of my peers would not have been able to do. Um, and I don't think it's because I'm personally special. I think it was because I was given a chance to be able to be in the right place at the right time a couple times. Um, and then because of those experiences, sorry, I'm getting all worked up, but because of those experiences, I think that's why I don't regret the decisions that I made. Um, and then there's the stuff that you tell everyone. What is it? This is the stuff you tell people that's polite at cocktail parties. Which is the opposite of what was it? Colonel Jessup says. The things you don't like to talk about people at those polite cocktail parties. So it's the opposite. Is usually what I say is, I was already on an SF staff for a couple of years. I didn't want to stay on an SF staff, so I wanted to figure out how to go back and do something. Like I didn't go to selection to be a staff officer. I was quite fine staying in signal branch and being a staff officer forever. So there's no reason to go to selection and then go like miss your opportunity to be someone who's commanding troops in combat. And so, yeah, but it's complicated, right? Because of what happened in Afghanistan and the way that we left, I think. And so there, were some really hard decisions I think I made at the time that I think are the right decisions. I wish things had not. I wish we had not left things the way we did in Afghanistan because of the effort and the spirit of so many people that was put together, combined together to do good things for other human beings. That I think in the midst of time is going to get lost because of all the press that's going to be focused on my opinion, sort of shitty way that we left the country. And I don't mean like just physically the logistical nightmare of how we actually left physically, which is also its own military planning fiasco. But I would submit the fact that like I looked our Afghan partners in the face because I believed it, saying that we were there to help them so that they could defend themselves and that they had us to rely on. And when called, we stepped up to the table every single time. And so it's like to have, sorry, I didn't expect this, but to have that sort of negated by the otherwise, the heavier aspect of like my feelings about it are so minuscule compared to the actual reality that those folks have to live in now. And so I don't feel sorry for myself, but it's something that still drives a little bit of frustration. And going back to, the comment about like doing what I'm doing now or why or anything of that nature is that I think that's a big part of even why I'm doing what I'm doing now is that like I can see the ghosts of Afghanistan and a lot of the people that we're helping now. And I know that by creating a group of people that want to see them succeed, surround them, that we're going to get them through some of these tougher times to be able to have them achieve the things that they're potential for or they have potential for. That I think I don't want to see people wallowing in the sadness of what was lost. And instead, I'd like to be able to be there for them to let them know that they're not doing it alone. And two, to be able to help them get to the next step of their life and, be able to take care of their families and things of that nature.
Yeah, the only place that we're alone is in our head. That's all. We have this thought that we're the only one that's going through these bad times or these horrible things, and we overinflate them in our head and make them something bigger than than they need to be, which isn't discounting that the bad shit has happened. It's just that it's way worse in our head than it is in reality, because there's a lot of other people going through these same things.
Yeah.
And, I posted something last night. It's like, we just need to speak up about a lot of these things, because the more
And
people that
it's
do
the
it,
man stuff
yeah.
too, right?
Well,
Which, like, I don't not and I'm not saying that in a negative way, but I think it's like I told you, like one of my motivating factors in life is to not bring shame upon my family. So part of that, the other flip side of that is I don't want to be a burden to them. So I think there is an awful lot of people that are high achieving men uh, that is motivated by not being a burden. And when you are dealing with like something that's sad or regrettable, um, more often than not, we just kind of lock it away because we don't want it to be someone else's burden. We don't want to be, or worse yet, we don't want to be seen as broken to the people we do tell it about. And because it's like the whole thing about PTS versus PTSD. I can't remember who said it, but I was at a conference at some point. And they were talking about PTSD, or it was a PTSD conference, and they were like, "There's too much of a D on PTSD. Like at the end of the day, it's a human condition to have PTS, to have post traumatic stress,
I got it from the fucking ocean when I got hurt. I didn't know it until I got around
and
to
it's
Zodiac again.
again, it's all relative to experience. So
Yeah.
if it's you were, sexually assaulted, had an abortion that maybe you're regretting now, got in a car accident, you're a first responder, like all of this stuff, right? If your parent, grandparent died, that could be the most impactful thing that's ever happened to you in your life because it's the most out of the norm. The fact that you have a stress condition tied to that is not a disorder. It's where the disorder, I think, comes in is the fact that now you cannot engage well with regular society, or you can't live a life that's effective or fulfilling. Where, like, I think a lot of us have PTS. I think I'm I'm appreciative of the fact that I've had the opportunity as a human being to be acquainted with something that's been a part of our human history since the dawn of time. That is warfare, that is people being cruel to one another, that is seen at extremes that people, I think, would have a hard time imagining. And when I have told people that aren't in the military, they don't believe me because it's so extreme. And so they they think I'm saying it for shock value. And so it's like I'm happy that I saw that because I know that's where the darkness is. Like the darkness is there. And it's not that, we're trying to get the happies to glads in a perfect society. It's that we are defending against a darkness, and that there is, and I'm not going to say it's like the devil or whatever, but there is a darkness within humanity that when unchecked is pretty ugly. And there are people, the sheepdogs. So it's the concept of, the wolf, the sheep, and then there's the sheepdog. And I think a lot of us are actually sheepdogs, where we are capable of fighting a wolf, but we would much rather protect the sheep. And the fact that the sheep don't know that they're a threat isn't a burden to us because it's what we're born to do. And so we don't expect the sheep to give us a thank you. We don't expect the sheep. We almost, to a degree, I'm happy that people in some part of my spirit don't know. Like I'm happy to relieve them of the burden of knowing because it's a freaking mess. And if people knew how messy it was, I think they would lose hope, a lot of people, and they would get in that sort of stress cycle of spinning, of anxiety, of trying to be able to address something.
Yeah. Or they'd be converted over to the, extreme coping mechanism of dark humor, and being more tempered to how things actually are. But there's a fine line with that also, right? of what you can take and what most people can't. When you think back on our exit from Afghanistan and like how it's going to be perceived down the road and your thoughts about it, are you like kind of lumping it in with how history is going to remember the previous Afghanistan withdrawal with like the Russians or the Soviets and like how that was forgotten as like a whole total loss? And then we kind of made this grandiose failure of an exit the same way. And then it'll just be lost to time of all the great things that did happen there.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I've kind of been viewing it through the lens of like Vietnam, more in that, like, what did we actually learn in Afghanistan? Um, is it a foreshadowing of our ineptitude to plan as a nation? Um, I mean, we would go. This is maybe more of an officer thing, but we would do like at Naval Postgraduate School or wherever. Like a big part of what we were talking about is why are we there? What's the exit strategy? What are we trying to achieve? What's the strategic ends? Like why are we still doing? Do we want to do, you know, counterterrorism stuff there? Do we want to do FID? Do we want to make them like Colombia? But it's like the inability for the country to be able to make a decision, I think, is probably the most thing that it's going to be like. Why was it over the course of two presidents, eventually three? Why was it so indecisive? Like, why as a country were we indecisive for 20 years? Like, no one, like, oh, we're telegraphing the end, et cetera, et cetera. Um, like, why did we not make a decision at some point? Is it because we were afraid of it getting leaked because we have no OPSEC? Is it because we didn't actually have an idea? Is it because when I was there in 2015, we were talking about a whole different reason to keep a relationship with Afghanistan that was like geopolitically important. And it strikes me as odd that 5 years later, that completely changed. Um, and so, like, I don't know. Like, it's the sort of thing where, like, you're getting told what you're, it's like UFOs. Like, I don't like all this stuff that was with, oh, we know UFOs. Like, I don't know, man. Like, it gets to a point that I'm like, what does the
Yeah.
president know of any of this stuff? I'd love to be, people are always like, who would you like to have dinner with? I'd love to sit down with both, GWB and President Obama and just have a conversation. Like what was the goal, man? What were we doing? Like, okay, first iteration, totally get it. Second iteration, to a point, get it. When we went to Operation whatever, I can't even remember what the end of
New
New
Dawn.
Dawn, like whatever the last like five different iterations of what we were doing there was, like, what are we doing? Because this doesn't match any of the stuff that we get in military strategic doctrine. Like, what exactly are we trying to do? Because we're we're like we're doing infrastructure, but at the same time we're doing it in like a patchwork quilt, or we're incentivizing people to like screw up the water table. Like, who's in charge? Would have been a great question. Like, I got dragged over the coals by General Nicholson, who is the commander of all forces in Afghanistan at one point, because he was like, "Hey, why aren't the Italians more, aggressive?" And I was like, "Because the Italians have been here for 17 years, and they don't see anything changing except Italians going home in body bags, and like." They're not going to be aggressive because they don't know the end state. Like, I went and talked to the Italian commander. And I'm like, hey, what is it going to take for us to go out and do partner missions with you or whatever? And he was like, we're just trying to keep the peace at this point. Like, we're like, have an espresso. Like, we're just trying to keep the peace. And I'd tell that to the 4-star, and he'd like, oh, you don't like our partners. SF guys think they know everything. And I got a 1-star grab my knee under the table, telling me to shut up. This is one of those moments. Um, and I was like, sir, you asked me for the truth. This is my take on the truth. And I like the Italians. Like, I go out to Herat every now and again and visit with them. Like, I don't think they're bad people. They're not going to get Italians killed for what they don't understand the point anymore. And so if we can't communicate to them what the point is, and like our command structure is all weird, like unified command is supposed to be a thing, right? But I got Polish special operations units that are co-located with me, but not under my command. I got Romanian units that I have take on of, but not add. Like, it's like, what are we doing? Like, who's in charge of what and why? And why don't we have any unified command? Why isn't there a unified purpose? Like, what are we trying to actually achieve? And it got to the point that toward the end of that rotation, I was like, oh, we're just trying not to get egg in our face. Because like our company was getting after it. Like we were like, okay, you want to open back up Southern Afghanistan? Got it. Like, we have Afghan special forces teams. I got 2,500 commandos that want to go, pipe hitters. They want to go do stuff. Great. Like, we're gonna combat multiply them, and they're gonna crush it. And so we started doing it, and then they were like, hey, you're killing the wrong Taliban. What do you mean the wrong Taliban? Like, it's like, bring me into these meetings so that I understand, because I'm going to go out and do what you want me to do. But if you're treating me like a freaking private and just telling me that I need to just sit behind the gun or carry this 5-gallon water can from point A to point B, and I don't need to know the point, then what am I doing being put in charge of all of Southern Afghanistan's special operations forces? Like, bring me into the meeting, because otherwise I'm gonna choose to mitigate risk differently. I'm not gonna risk guys' lives if the point is for us to just not have anything happen. Like, I'm not
You're
gonna
just
put guys out in a gun and put them in helicopters and drop them into. I'm not gonna do prison rescue. Like, we did 4 prison rescues. Like, what are we doing?
what you're describing to me sounds like playing war, not actually waging like war with a end state of winning. It's we're just going to stay proficient at war or
Yeah.
at fighting
It,
combat, and that's it.
yeah, it was frustrating. And the problem, it's fine, but because I was new to the battalion, new to the company, like, some of the team leaders didn't, like, it was their only time in combat. And so they didn't understand why I was so particular about certain things. They didn't, and like, I got, one of the things that I regret is losing my composure on one of my captains at one point. And because he was right. He's like, we need to go get after it. This is the thing that we need to do to keep us safe. This is the thing we need to do to have the the commandos be more effective. And I was like, yeah, man, it's not going to happen. Like, I could brief this in the most brilliant way possible, and it'll never happen, because that's not what I am gathering the intent is, because we're trying to. And every time that we start getting things going, and I'm an SF guy. So if they're hook or crook, I got conventional aviation forces that I got aligned to us now, working with Tech South, the 1-star down there, because he wanted to get after it. So it was like, all right, you don't want to give me soft air. You don't want to give me soft ISR. I don't care. I'll go use conventional stuff. You don't want to use conventional stuff? Great. I'll use Afghan stuff. Like, we're going to pace these enemy. I've been fighting these guys for 2 decades. Like, we're going to go pace them, because that's our job. And I don't mean just put people in body bags. I mean, push them out of their homes, push them out of a place that they can affect the community, give us some breathing room, so that then the Afghan SF teams or the Afghan, security forces can actually regain a foothold of security and be able to try to return life back to normal. And so that's our job. And if you're telling me that I can't do that, I'm just going to find a way to do it, because that's what the people there deserve. And that's what I've been trained to do.
And this is your time as an AOB commander, right? Okay. And how much of your time in charge of the company were you deployed?
All of it.
All of it. Wow. So you didn't really get to see like the garrison in
No
command
idea.
versus
Didn't do
no idea.
PMT, didn't do, R3, nothing. I came back and they were like, hey, thanks for your service. Please find work elsewhere. So I was initially I was slotted because it's normal for a major, and I was super senior. So like the one job that I could have still taken in group was as the group XO, and it wasn't in the cards because again the regime stuff. And so I ended up being a SOST up at the State Department and working at INL and doing like tier one CONUP briefings for SOCOM, which is great. And I went to college in DC, so I got to see my friends. Working in the State Department, and I'd worked a lot out of embassies. So people in the State Department felt I had credibility within, the Department of State. Uh, Played a lot of translator between Mars and Venus, between, sort of DoD and Department of State intent, to make sure that we could still get things done that we need to get done. But it was great.
You make lieutenant colonel and you go, you become a recruiting command. That's obviously a completely different world. But the whole timeline of things, what's your favorite like leadership position that you were in?
With the exception of I don't know. There's three. One is like as an AOP commander, where you can actually foster teams to do their job and do it well and give them the top cover to be able to do it, and give them planning and resources, which doesn't always happen. And then as a team leader, which, because like I said, it was exactly like everything you learn in the Q course. Like I can't ask for a better experience as a team leader. And then the one though that I always think about a lot is the solo position in Peru, where without really we were quiet professionals that helped the Peruvians become extraordinarily successful at what they were doing. And I had SEALs and Rangers and Green Berets and all stuff down there, and none of them had serious incidents. There was never never an OPREP 3. There was never, I worked with group to be able to have them do their traditional CONOPS in theater instead of having to go back to do training. So they did everything from glacier climbing to off-road motorcycle stuff to ASO stuff to diving to whatever, all the stuff that they should have been doing in theater that we never ever got approved. Like I got it approved. Like stuff like that. I thought was great because those team leaders and those team sergeants, I think, respect the fact that their experience there was real. And because the whole point of us doing all that stuff is that we could fight in the terrain. If there's a holiday and we're just sitting in our team house twiddling our thumbs, then we're not doing the thing that we're there for, really.
There's so much fun. There's so much cool shit once you get in, and then you just gotta push through and get to it. All right, man. I got 5 questions here. I ask everybody, and I'll cut you loose. What's your response to thank you for your service?
Usually I appreciate you because it's true. Like I appreciate the Americans that typically do it. They're coming from a perspective that I know is maybe one of naivety, but I think they genuinely, when they do say that, it does take effort. There's a part of me though that I'm like, you don't actually know what you're thanking me about. Um, there was a time where I was like, this is stupid. I don't want to like what? Like it just feels like a rote thing. But now I don't know. I don't make it my personality anymore. I just appreciate people. Um, and then
What's the one characteristic that sets operators apart from the conventional forces?
relentless adaptability. So the fact that, like I was saying, like you told me what my mission was, message to Garcia. Okay, take assets away. You think I'm not going to do it? Like I'm still going to find a way to do it. Like take away everything. Like recruiting, you don't like the way I'm doing stuff, so you cut my marketing budget. Noted. Is it going to affect me? Nope. Still going to win. Like we'll find a way to win. And that's not me. That's the whole community thinks like that. And so when people push on us as a community and they're like, we're going to put you back in a box, like the convention, especially conventional commanders do that. Like you're like, man, you do not know the hornet's nest that you're shaking up right now, because you have a whole bunch of nonconformists that are in the military doing something that conforms. Like, do not set them free, because it's going to be chaos.
Yeah. Previous guest had said, know when to use the gray area, know when to use it, right? And I could see that coming up right away. Oh, you get over to the regular army and go, hey, these are your constraints. And go, oh, you don't even know what constraints are, buddy. I'm going to totally fucking ruin your world here. All right. What is the one moment of your career that you wish you could go back and relive or redo, and it won't change where you are now?
There's an instance that I was in Afghanistan. I was the headquarters company commander and the camp commandant in Afghanistan, and I kind of got into it a little bit with the deputy commanding officer. I was right. He was protecting this other lieutenant colonel who was wrong. The other lieutenant colonel had lost his composure when he was talking to me because he was upset with something that we had done that there was nothing wrong with. And I told, in the midst of him yelling at me, like spittle hitting me in the face, this lieutenant colonel, I had told him to, once he regained his composure, I would come back and talk to him, and did an about face and walked out of his office. And the deputy commanding officer brought me in like that, like probably the 45 minutes later, and was like, hey, there's a difference between being different and being useful. Like if you're just being different to be combative, don't do that. Like now this guy's going to be an antagonist to everything that we do. You were right. He was wrong. There's a better way to deal with that. And it's sometimes okay to just take an ass chewing, knowing that it doesn't matter in the long run. And I was like, you're right, sir. But I'd never done that before, and I really wanted to. And according to according to good order and discipline, I was in the right. He goes, yeah, but we're all stuck in Afghanistan in a prison. Now I got to see this guy at Chow. And I was like, sorry, sir, I'm sorry. So that's one of the things that I wish I'd kind of had a little bit more maturity at the time.
What's the best piece of advice that you received during your career?
It's pretty consistent. So it's always look for work. So be useful. Explain why you're useful. Explain why your unit's useful, whatever that happens to be, company, team, platoon, whatever. Sell your team to people on their capability, not on a bunch of pomp and circumstance. And but always be useful and always find work.
Were you afraid of then, and what are you afraid of now?
I think I covered it before. I was afraid of being unprepared during combat, and then because of my lack of preparation, I was going to cost people their lives. Now I think I'm less afraid, I think, than I am more. I don't feel like I'm afraid of that much anymore. Now it's almost like I feel a pressure of a ticking of time that I feel like I need to stay focused to make an impact before my time runs out. Is kind of, and that may or may not mean death, but it's different now. Like before, I was afraid of not being enough. Now I'm afraid of not utilizing what is enough to the greatest extent possible.
I like that. It's it is though interesting. Once you focus and start making the most of your time, time starts going by faster.
Yeah,
There's not
yeah,
enough
for
time
sure.
in the day. It's like, oh fuck, where did it go? So it is interesting that once you start getting into effectively using your time and doing what you want to do, there isn't enough of it. There just isn't enough of it. How can everyone find you on the socials and Owners in Honor?
Yeah, so you could find me on LinkedIn at Patrick. I think that's where you found it. It's Patrick Michael Flood is my LinkedIn because I had
Yeah.
to specify it. And then um, if you're looking for Instagram, you're not going to find me because I have a private account, and that's a whole thing that happened during recruiting command. And then otherwise, our website is ownersinhonor.org. We're always looking for people that are interested in buying a business, operating a business, or exiting a business, who are veterans, or interested in exiting a business to a veteran. Always looking for people that are able to support either allied service providers that work within the mergers and acquisitions, line of work, or people that want to see veterans succeed in communities. That could be anything from a chamber of commerce to a bank, you name it. And then that's about it.
Yeah, man. You got anything for me?
No, I appreciate you, and not in a naive sort of way, but I appreciate the fact that you're doing this. Like, I think it's a very grounded way, and to kind of go over some of the stuff that we talked about before we went live is, I think there's a lot of fetishization of our combat experiences, specifically like trading bullets back and forth. And I think most of it is, if we peel that part of it away, most of it's a very intense human experience that's surrounded by a profound experience of love that I think most of us are never going to feel in a lifetime, because of people that are actually willing to die for you, multiple people. Um, and the more that you engage as a human being and laugh about stuff and are sad about things, but do it as a group, I think the better off we are. And in order to do that, you have to have a dialogue. And I think this is a way to have a dialogue.
Try my best with what little skills and experience I have, but I'm trying just to find my little piece. And so I really appreciate that, man. Well, until next time, bye, everybody.